Chapter 297. Thousands of sharp icicles flashed with a cold light as they rushed towards the ice snake. At this moment, they were less than 10 feet away from the ice snake. This ice snake was indeed worthy of being a 1,000-year-old spiritual creature. At this critical moment, it did not panic. With a swoosh, it spread out the tens of thousands of scales on its body. Following that, it activated the 1,000-year-old ice core in its body. Swoosh! Under the activation of its core, countless rays of silver light shot out from the cracks of its scales. Over the past 1,000 years, it had experienced the collapse of icebergs countless times. Every time, it was like taking a bath, enjoying the process. But today, the thousands of icicles it created were different from ordinary ice. These icicles were created by using its 1,000-year-old ice core. They were extremely hard, like steel or iron. It cannot be treated lightly. At this moment, the ice snake was wrapped in a silver light. With thousands of rays of light, it was like an angry silver dragon. Boom, boom, boom. The thousands of icicles were shattered by the ice snake's thousands of rays of silver light, turning into a mist of ice. Looking at Yi Fan again, he smiled, squinted his eyes, and exerted force with his feet. Bang! The layer of ice under Yi Fan's feet was instantly shattered by his stomp. A shock wave spread out and his body shot into the mist of ice like an arrow leaving the bow. At this moment, the ice snake was completely enveloped in the thick mist of ice. Snakes were born with poor eyesight. In addition, Yi Fan's ever-flame sword was not with him. With the cold air from the snake's shadow sword at his waist as a cover, the ice snake did not know where Yi Fan was at this moment. Swoosh! Just as the ice snake was about to disperse the mist, Yi Fan's figure appeared in front of it. The distance between them was less than half a foot. The ice snake's blood-red pupils instantly contracted. Just as it was in a daze, Yi Fan swung his arm and formed a fist with his right hand. Borrowing the force of his body's charge, he punched the huge ice snake's chin. This punch could be considered as revenge for being smashed into the ice hole earlier. Boom! The ice snake's head was lifted up by Yi Fan's punch. Its huge body that weighed tens of thousands of jin was sent flying off the ground. This was the first time the dizzy ice snake was sent flying by someone's fist since it was born. Under Yi Fan's punch, the giant snake was first lifted dozens of feet off the ground. Then its body leaned back and fell heavily to the ground. Boom! The ice snake fell to the ground, stirring up ice shards that shot into the sky, lingering for a long time. Yi Fan whistled, clapped his hands, and slowly landed on the ice. The young man who was standing hundreds of feet away was so shocked by the scene that his jaw almost dropped to the ground. From a moment the giant snake floated out of the ice hole to the moment it landed on the ground, Yi Fan had used less than 10 minutes to send the ice snake, which was in its prime, flying with his bare hands and brute force without using any spiritual energy. What kind of cultivation did he have to be in order to accomplish this? When the icy mist that filled the sky gradually dispersed, the young man was shocked to discover that the 1,000-feet-long ice snake had completely disappeared without a trace. On the surface of the ice, there was an ice cave that was several feet in size, and it was emitting cold air. The ice snake had escaped. Fisk, it's so weak. Yi Fan looked at the huge ice cave in front of him and curled his lips. Are you done fooling around? Just as he was making fun of the ice snake's weakness, another voice rang out in his mind. Oh, Yi Fan narrowed his red eyes and smiled as he muttered to himself. I helped you chase this beast away, but you're blaming me? Did I ask you for help? The voice in his mind said coldly, This body is mine, not yours. Tsk, Yi Fan laughed. If I wasn't afraid that you would be smacked to death by that ice loach's tail, I wouldn't have bothered to come out. I think you're really a busybody. Yi Fan continued coldly in his mind. You didn't come out when you should have, but you came out when you shouldn't have. Why weren't you so proactive when my soul left my body that day? Why? Are you blaming me for leaving you in the lurch? Yi Fan asked with a smile. I don't blame you, and I don't blame anyone else. The voice in his mind sounded cold and calm. I only blame myself for not being strong enough and not being as skilled as others. The smile on Yi Fan's face disappeared, and his expression turned solemn. I naturally have my reasons for not doing anything, Yi Fan said. That's your problem. It has nothing to do with me. The voice in his mind continued. You don't have to explain anything to me, and I don't want to listen anymore. Yi Fan frowned and did not say anything. You've already fought and caused a ruckus. It's time to go back. Don't delay me from finding the soul-returning herb. The voice in his mind ordered him to leave. Oh, after hearing this, Yi Fan's face once again revealed an evil smile. What if I don't go back? Then you can try. Another Yi Fan's voice came out of Yi Fan's mouth. At the same time, the red light in his left eye began to fade, and it began to emit a five-colored light. At this moment, the colors of his two eyes were completely different. His right eye flashed with a bloody light, while his left eye emitted a five-colored light. At this moment, Yi Fan's eyes were 5 feet long, and they were overflowing with light. It's a pity that you and I can only share this body. Otherwise, I really want to fight with you and see if your mysterious sky's secret techniques second stage is stronger, or if my proud moon heavenly scriptures second stage is stronger. I won't fight with you, and I'm not interested in fighting with you. Also, I'll say it again, this body is mine, not yours. As Yi Fan spoke, a five-colored light began to appear in his right eye, and the red light began to fade. When you're under someone else's roof, you have no choice but to lower your head. I can only blame the seal on my body. You do what you need to do, and I'll go back. As the red light in his right eye gradually faded, Yi Fan completely regained his consciousness. After regaining his consciousness, Yi Fan reached his hand into the ice cave. Wong! The red light of the Everflame sword rushed out of the water and flew back into Yi Fan's hand. He put the Everflame sword back on his back and immediately used his movement skill. Chapter 298. How is he? Yi Fan asked the dumbfounded boy as he squatted down to check on Sakita's injuries. His fever has subsided. He should wake up soon. The boy replied to Yi Fan. Yi Fan did not say anything. He just pressed his hand on Sakita's chest. Buzz! A white light flashed in Yi Fan's hand. He was using his spiritual power to check on Sakita's condition. Although it was already past noon, the heat in Sakita's body was still very shocking. Especially his chest. It was as if there was a raging fire burning. Yi Fan understood that Sakita must have thought that swallowing the fire snake's inner core would greatly increase his power. However, his thinking was too simple. Not everyone could consume the Niden. As the saying goes, if you don't have a diamond, don't take on a porcelain job. Sakita's body was mortal. He did not have any spiritual power. He could not control the power of the 1,000-year-old fire snake's inner core. Instead, it backfired and caused a fire backlash. Now, the raging inferno inner core in his body was becoming more and more violent and unstable. If this continued, even if he was in the extreme north where cold air was piercingly cold, it would not be long before he would die from internal combustion. As Yi Fan thought about it, he withdrew the spiritual energy in his hand and slowly stood up. How long does it take for him to have an attack? After getting up, Yi Fan turned to ask the boy. Last year, each attack lasted for an incense stick's worth of time. The boy replied, from this half year onwards, each attack will last for at least half an hour. So it was like this. Yi Fan nodded slightly, his expression dignified. There were only two ways to save Sakita. He could either find the fire snake's inner core and give it to him to cancel out the power of ice and fire, or use his spiritual power to suck out the 1,000-year-old fire snake's inner core. In fact, with his current cultivation, he was fully capable of sucking Sakita's inner core into his own body, but he did not dare to take the risk. This was the 1,000-year-old fire snake's inner core. It was not a joke. If the inner core conflicted with his spiritual power, the consequences would be unimaginable. He couldn't allow anything to happen to his body. He wanted to find the soul returning grass. He wanted to save his wife. After finding the soul returning grass, he had to return to Pear Blossom Palace within 2 hours. If he couldn't find the soul returning grass, he would have to find Matsumoto Takeyoshi. At that time, a fierce battle would be inevitable. Other than that, he also had to think of a way to save Xiao Zhao and restore her human form. Everything required spiritual energy, powerful spiritual energy. If he wanted to save this person, he could only use the first method, which was to find the ice snake's inner core. How is he? Can he still be saved? The young man saw that Yi Fan was silent and immediately asked, "If this continues, we won't be able to hold on for much longer," Yi Fan said to the youth. After hearing this, the young man frowned. "Don't be sad. I'll go find the ice snake now and retrieve its core to save him," Yi Fan said as he prepared to turn around to find the ice snake. Just now, he had been careless and underestimated his opponent. If he were to fight with the ice snake again, he would definitely not lose. "Wait a minute," the young man called out to Yi Fan from behind. "What is it?" Yi Fan turned around and looked at the young man. "We found the soul returning grass," the young man said. "What?" Yi Fan's eyes lit up, and he rushed in front of the young man. "What did you say?" Yi Fan excitedly pressed his hands on the young man's shoulders. "You found the soul returning grass." The young man nodded. "Where is it?" Yi Fan asked happily. "Where is the soul returning grass?" "It's in an underground ice cave 30 miles from here. Uncle Sakitu and I saw it with our own eyes," the young man said to Yi Fan. "We met the ice snake there." "Ice snake? Soul returning grass?" Yi Fan slapped his forehead and scolded himself for being stupid. Before leaving, Jinshan had told him that the place where the soul returning grass grew would definitely be guarded by a fae. This ice snake was a 1,000-year-old fae. How could he forget this? He had been searching horizontally on the glacier while the young man had been rushing vertically. Therefore, even though he had searched hundreds of miles every day, he still missed the soul returning grass that was not far from him. This was great. He had found the soul returning grass. Chico could be saved. Yi Fan's excitement was beyond words. However, he quickly calmed down. Jinshan had said that the soul returning grass needed 30 years to bloom from breaking the ice. He did not know how much the soul returning grass in the ice cave had grown. If it was about to bloom, it would be fine. If it had just broken out of the ice, it would be troublesome. In that case, he could only continue to search on the glacier. There are a total of 4 soul returning grasses in the ice cave. The young man saw through Yi Fan's thoughts and said, 3 of them are about to bloom. At most, they will bloom in 3 days. 3 soul returning grasses? 3 days. This news made Yi Fan excited again. The heavens are really helping me. My beloved wife is not destined to die. "Mr. Yi," the young man said hesitantly to Yi Fan, "can you do me a favor?" "What favor?" Yi Fan looked up and asked with a smile. "When you get the soul returning grass, can you give me one?" The young man said softly as he looked at the unconscious Sakitu lying next to him. "You want to give him the soul returning grass?" Yi Fan asked the young man. The young man nodded. The ice snake's cold inner core and the fire snake's inner core in Uncle Sakita's body are natural enemies. One fire snake's inner core is enough to make him suffer. If he takes the ice snake's inner core, I'm afraid he did not finish his sentence. Yi Fan was silent. The young man's words were not without reason. Sakitu had no spiritual energy left, and he had been tortured by the fire snake's inner core for many days. Most of the essence in his body had been burned away. If he were to consume the ice snake's inner core, it would be like throwing a piece of burning coal into a basin of ice water. The energy that would be ignited would cause his meridians to explode, and he would die instantly. Chapter 299. Do you know what Uncle Sakitu said when we found the soul returning grass? The youth looked at Yi Fan with a pair of clear eyes. He said that you can save your wife this time. Yi Fan's heart skipped a beat, and he frowned. This Western region man was as kind as this youth. When he saw the soul returning grass, the first thing he thought of was someone else and not himself. "I promise you, if we can successfully get 3 stalks of soul returning grass, I will give you 1 stalk," Yi Fan said to the youth. "But if I can only get 1 stalk, then I can't give it up." Yi Fan made up his mind and said he couldn't live without Chico. He had thought it through. If he could only get 1 stalk of soul returning grass, he He would save Chico first and then bring this Western region man back to Pear Blossom Palace. Pear Blossom Palace had all 5 elements, so there must be a way to save him. Thank you, Mr. Yi. The young man was overjoyed at the unexpected good news. He quickly bowed to Yi Fan. The 3 stalks of soul-returning grass were only 5 feet apart. If he could get 1 stalk, then he could get 3. You said that the soul-returning grass will bloom in 3 days. Yi Fan asked the youth. He had to carefully confirm the time the soul-returning grass would bloom. He couldn't be careless. Otherwise, if he missed the flowering, all his efforts would be wasted. At least 2 days, at most 3 days, the youth replied. Yi Fan nodded. He began to plan in his heart. He would rest well today and conserve his energy. At noon the next day, he would rush to the ice snake's nest and chase away the ice snakes. Then, he would guard the soul-returning grass day and night, waiting for it to bloom. The wind here is too strong. Bring him to a place nearby that is sheltered from the wind and wait for me. I'm going to find something to eat. I'll be back soon, Yi Fan said as he slowly floated up from the ground. The young man nodded and carried the unconscious Sakitu to an ice mountain not far away. Yi Fan used his movement technique and flew towards the south for several hundred miles before he slowly landed and broke through the ice to retrieve the fish. Naturally, he had his reasons for doing this. If he wanted to get the fish, he had to break the ice. Once the loud sound of breaking the ice alarmed the frightened ice snake, causing it to go berserk, it would not be easy to deal with. He was not afraid of anything else, but he was afraid that the ice snake would destroy the 3 stalks of soul-returning grass in a fit of anger. This place was a few hundred miles away from the ice serpent cave, so it was very safe to take the fish. Yi Fan broke through the layer of ice and caught 3 huge fat fishes. He then used the cold air of the snake's shadow sword at his waist to freeze the 3 fat fishes together. He then used his movement skill to return to the place where he was just now and found the 2 people waiting there. Yi Fan used the leaf fire sword to dig out a huge ice cave that was 5 feet deep and 10 feet wide. After the 3 of them entered the ice cave, Yi Fan used a block of ice to seal the entrance of the cave, leaving only a hole that was the size of a palm. After the youth settled Sakita down, he chatted with Yi Fan while he cleaned up the fat fish. Yi Fan found out from the youth that his name was Han Ru. He had been interested in Taoism since he was young. When he was 18 years old, he left his family and became a monk. He traveled all over the world to seek Taoism and immortality. Although he looked like he was 18 years old, he was actually 80 years old. Perhaps his persistence moved the heavens, or perhaps he was lucky. One summer when he was 60 years old, he found the immortal herb recorded in a Taoist scripture on an unknown mountain by chance. It was called the analgesic herb. After consuming the immortal herb, he felt sleepy and fell into a deep sleep. In his sleep, the great Emperor Jinwu of the North appeared in his dream. Emperor Jinwu told him in his dream that his foundation was not good, his immortal bones were not formed, and his immortal record was unknown. If he wanted to become an immortal, it would be as difficult as ascending to heaven. However, seeing that he was dedicated to Taoism and was persistent in seeking immortality, he specially gave him the analgesic herb. When Han Ru saw Jinwu in his dream, he could not help but feel inexplicably moved. He cried bitterly and kept kowtowing to Emperor Jinwu, hoping that the emperor would enlighten him. Emperor Jinwu saw that he was eager to seek Taoism, so he gave him a favor and asked him to come to the extreme north to find him. After he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared. When Han Ru woke up, he found that he had been completely reborn and had become a handsome youth. Since then, Han Ru went all the way north. It took him nearly 20 years to arrive at the extreme north. After eating the analgesic herb, his body was as light as a swallow, and he was stronger than a human. He did not feel hungry for several years. On the way to the extreme north, he met the man from the western region, Sakitu. The 2 of them felt like old friends at first sight and traveled together. Later, they met Goatee and the rich merchant who came to the extreme north to look for the soul return grass. After the youth finished speaking, he asked Yi Fan where they went. Yi Fan told him the truth. The youth was shocked and thought that it was a close call. After the three fat fish were cleaned up, Yi Fan took out the firestone that Xiao Zhao gave him from his arms and stuffed it directly into the mouth of the fat fish. He gently activated the firestone with spiritual power and roasted the fat fish. The youth was stunned again. Every single thing on Yi Fan's body made him feel incomparably mysterious. When the three fat fish were roasted, Sakitu began to wake up slowly. When the youth told him what had happened, Sakitu was shocked at first, and then he kept bowing to Yi Fan to thank him. The sky was getting dark as the days went by. After the three of them finished eating the fat fish, they rested. The youth and Sakitu rested their heads on the cloth and fell asleep. Yi Fan sat cross-legged and closed his eyes slightly, replenishing the consumed spiritual power. Chapter 300. Cough, cough, cough. Sakitu, who was lying at the side, suddenly started coughing violently. The young man was awakened by the coughing and started patting Sakitu's back gently. Cough, cough, cough. Sakitu's coughing became more and more intense. Buzz. Just as the young man was about to find some ice to relieve Sakitu's pain, Sakitu's chest suddenly emitted a scorching red light. Yi Fan, who was meditating with his legs crossed, suddenly opened his eyes. Ah, ah, ah. Sakitu screamed in pain as he used his hands to tear at the clothes in front of his chest. Oh no, the fire snake's inner core in his body was about to go berserk. Yi Fan frowned and immediately stood up. The young man was also shocked by the red light in front of Sakitu's chest. Seeing this, he immediately picked up a piece of ice from the ground and rubbed it on Sakitu's bare chest. Chi! The moment the ice touched Sakitu's chest, there was a burst of steam. Let me do it, Yi Fan said as he quickly came in front of Sakitu. Hearing Yi Fan's words, the young man immediately moved to the side. Buzz! Yi Fan reached out one hand and channeled the cold energy from the snake's shadow sword into his palm. He then slowly placed it on Sakitu's chest. Chi! The cold and heat intertwined and the steam rose. Sakitu's expression was extremely painful. What a strong heat. As Yi Fan thought about it, he increased the coldness in his hand. He did not dare to directly inject the cold energy into Sakitu's body. If he did, Sakitu's meridians would immediately explode and he would die. The only thing he could do now was to use the cold energy to neutralize the heat emitted by the fire snake's inner core. Yi Fan originally thought that the fire snake's inner core would restrain itself after coming into contact with the cold energy from the snake's shadow sword. However, not only did the heat from the fire snake's inner core not decrease, it even started to go berserk. Buzz! The red light in Sakitu's chest expanded rapidly and started to spread everywhere. In the blink of an eye, Sakitu's entire body, except for his head, was completely red and the heat was spreading everywhere. Kill me. Sakitu endured the immense pain and struggled to speak. Yi Fan frowned and began to use his spiritual energy to activate the snake's shadow sword at his waist. Under the stimulation of the spiritual energy, the cold air in Yi Fan's hands also rapidly increased. Crack, 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 crack. A thin layer of ice began to form on Sakitu's chest and slowly spread. Please, please. Sakitu's voice was close to madness. Kill me, hum. The fire snake's inner core went berserk again. Now, even Sakitu's head was glowing with a scorching red light. However, Yi Fan did not dare to continue releasing the cold air. The reason was simple. The more frigid energy he released, the more raging the fire snake core in Sasita's body would become. If he continued to increase the frigid energy, Sasita's internal organs and even his entire body would be completely scorched by the raging heat. Yi Fan was now in a difficult position. If he continued to increase the cold air, Sakitu would be burnt to a crisp. If he withdrew the cold air now, the fire snake's inner core would be even more violent, and Sakitu would be burnt to death. Sakitu screamed at the sky. Whoosh! As the fire snake's inner core went berserk in Sakitu's body, 7 rays of red light shot out from his eyes, ears, and nose. If this continued, Sakitu would be burnt to ashes in less than 10 minutes. Yi Fan was in a dilemma. What should he do? Should he just leave? No. Sakitu was a good person. A good person could not die. Yi Fan made up his mind and withdrew the cold air in his hands. At the same time, he activated 30% of his spiritual energy and injected it into Sakitu's chest. He wanted to absorb the fire snake's inner core into his body. Following Yi Fan's thought, a tyrannical spirit energy surged out of his palm. It passed through Sakitu's charcoal-like bones and muscles and reached his chest as if it was in an uninhabited land. Whoosh! After the spiritual energy entered Sakitu's body, it did not stop. It quickly wrapped around the walnut-sized 1,000-year-old fire snake's inner core that was suspended in front of Sakitu's chest. Now was the time, Yi Fan thought, as he withdrew the spiritual energy that was wrapped around the inner core. Whoosh! Under the influence of Yi Fan's spiritual energy, the fire snake's inner core rushed out of Sakitu's body and entered Yi Fan's body through his palms. Poof! Sakitu's chest was bleeding. The fire snake's inner core had left a walnut-sized hole in his chest. The moment the 1,000-year-old fire snake's inner core entered Yi Fan's body, it became excited. The inner core itself was not much different from spiritual energy. It was just that they were in different forms. To a certain extent, the inner core was the condensed form of spiritual energy. Therefore, when the fire snake's inner core entered Yi Fan's meridians, it was instantly attracted by the overbearing spiritual energy in Yi Fan's body. It quickly flowed through Yi Fan's meridians. A ball of red light started to move up from Yi Fan's palms. It flowed along Yi Fan's arm to his shoulder, and then directly rushed into Yi Fan's sea of qi. Whoosh! Yi Fan's chest suddenly glowed red and formed a fist-sized ball of red light. On top of the ball of red light, countless blood-colored electric arcs intertwined and moved around. The fire snake's inner core was completely attracted by the pure, 5-colored spiritual energy in Yi Fan's sea of qi. Therefore, when it entered his sea of qi, it immediately started to move around like a dragon trapped in the sea. Whoosh! The red electric arcs quickly spread out from Yi Fan's chest. They flowed through his 8 extraordinary meridians and reached all his limbs and bones. Yi Fan closed his eyes and frowned. He calmly observed the state of the inner core in his body. At this moment, he definitely could not use his spiritual energy to suppress the inner core. That would be counterproductive. What he needed to do now was to guide the inner core and calm it down gradually. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Chapter 301. The fact that the inner core was able to circulate so smoothly was all thanks to Yi Fan's cultivation of the mysterious Sky Secret Manual. After he finished cultivating the second layer of the manual, heaven-shattering rock, the meridians in his body were almost completely devoid of impurities. Apart from spiritual energy, there was nothing else. In addition, the spiritual energy contained within the 1,000-year fire snake's inner core was completely different from other types of spiritual energy, so there was no conflict between the two. Buzz, buzz, buzz. After the red electric light completed a large cycle, it automatically returned to the inner core in his dantian. The red ball of light in front of Yi Fan's chest began to slowly shrink, and the fire snake's inner core in his dantian also seemed to have calmed down. However, Yi Fan was not careless at all. He had a feeling that the 1,000-year fire snake's inner core in his body was not so simple. From a situation when he used the cold energy to suppress the inner core, this inner core was extremely tyrannical. Why did it calm down so quickly after entering his body? There was definitely something strange about this. Buzz! Just as Yi Fan was puzzled, the fire snake's inner core in his dantian, which had calmed down, suddenly exploded with red light. Raging heat. So it was like this. Yi Fan thought to himself. He didn't have time to think, and immediately sat cross-legged on the ground. He closed his eyes and began to observe his dantian. Amidst the abundant five-colored spiritual chi in his dantian, the walnut-sized fire serpent's inner core was recklessly emitting a red light. It violently swam back and forth in his dantian, recklessly colliding. The nearly liquid five-colored spiritual energy was being randomly stirred up by the fire snake's inner core and immediately began to churn. Yi Fan understood that this Niden was originally the cultivation item of the 1,000-year-old fire serpent in the desert of the western region. It had stayed in the fire serpent's body for no less than 1,000 years. Naturally, it would be tainted with the fire serpent's violent aura. Buzz! The fire snake's inner core's colliding speed became faster and faster, and the red light also became brighter and brighter. It seemed like it wanted to repeat the same trick and use the same method to torture Yi Fan. However, Yi Fan was not Sassitu. When he saw that the fire snake's inner core had become violent, he immediately mobilized 20% of his spiritual energy in his sea of chi and heavily controlled the rampaging fire snake. With a thought from Yi Fan, the five-colored spirit force in his dantian immediately reacted. Sizzle red, purple, white, gold, and green. 5 streaks of lightning appeared out of thin air in his chi sea and quickly wrapped around the crazy inner core. However, after the fire snake's Niden was suppressed by the 5-colored electric light, not only did it not restrain its heat, it instead became even more excited. Wong! The red light emitted by the fire snake's dantian increased explosively once more. At the same time, it released countless bolts of red lightning. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The red electric light and Yi Fan's 5-colored electric light instantly intertwined. His aura was majestic, and light radiated in all directions. What a powerful spiritual energy! Yi Fan exclaimed. The spiritual energy released by the fire snake's inner core was actually able to withstand 20% of his spiritual pressure. Sizzle! The red electric light emitted by the fire snake's inner core became stronger and stronger. The 5-colored electric light wrapped around it gradually became weaker. Yi Fan's eyebrows began to wrinkle. He had underestimated this inner core. Sizzle! The red electric light's radiance became brighter and brighter. It even started to wrap around the 5-colored electric light. The 5-colored electric light gradually became weaker and was gradually engulfed by the red electric light. Wong! The fire snake's inner core let out an excited cry, as if it was cheering for its victory. Yi Fan was instantly shocked. 20% of his spiritual pressure was actually so easily dispersed by this small inner core. However, the next scene made him even more flabbergasted. After his 5-colored lightning had been dispelled, the inner core did not continue to release heat. Instead, it knocked against the inner wall of Yi Fan's energy aura as if it was provoking him. Then, it slowly moved upwards and floated above Yi Fan's energy aura. This inner core actually wants to compete with my spiritual energy. Yi Fan was shocked. Good. Today, I want to see how strong your spiritual energy is. Seeing the fire snake's inner core provoking him, Yi Fan's temper immediately became stubborn. With a thought, he instantly mobilized the 4 spiritual energies in his body. Sizzle! Red, purple, white, gold, and green, all 5 different colors, dazzling with domineering light, surged out from Yi Fan's sea of chi. Like 5 huge dragons, they pounced on the fire snake's inner core that was floating above his sea of chi. Wong! The fire snake's inner core let out an excited cry again. Sizzle! 5 red electric lights suddenly shot out from the fire snake's inner core, directly suppressing Yi Fan's 5-colored electric light. Bang, bang, bang. Red light splashed everywhere. The 5 colors shone brilliantly. The 2 great forces instantly clashed again. This time, Yi Fan used 40% of his spiritual energy. His strength was 2 times that of the previous one. Even so, the strength of the 2 sides was still neck and neck. They were in a deadlock. Seeing this situation, Yi Fan was enraged. He immediately raised his spiritual energy to 60%. Sizzle! Under the stimulation of Yi Fan's spiritual energy, the five-colored electric light instantly doubled. The situation was beginning to tilt in Yi Fan's favor. The fire snake's inner core's 5 red lights were gradually pushed back by Yi Fan's 5-colored electric light. Wong, seeing that the powerful 5-colored electric light was about to hit the inner core, the fire snake's inner core that was floating above his sea of qi suddenly trembled. The red light around its body instantly doubled. The red electric light that was being pushed back once again showed its might and slowly pushed back Yi Fan's 5-colored electric light. Yi Fan was instantly enraged by this inner core. He no longer had the time to play with this inner core. In his fury, he first completely retracted the 5-colored electric light. Then, he activated the powerful spiritual energy in his sea of qi and raised his spiritual energy to 80%. Wong. The 5-colored spiritual energy in his sea of qi instantly emitted a dazzling 5-colored light. The surging and turbulent spiritual energy began to swirl like the waves of the ocean. Whoosh! As the colorless spiritual energy spun faster and faster, a huge whirlpool appeared in the center of his sea of qi. The fire snake's inner core seemed to have sensed the strength of the opponent and immediately gathered all its spiritual energy. Sizzle! Above the inner core, the violent red electric light crazily shuttled back and forth, accumulating power and waiting to be unleashed. Mysterious Sky Secret Arts, second layer, earth-shattering breakthrough. With a thought, Yi Fan began to make his move. Whoosh! A thick 5-colored light pillar instantly rushed out from the center of the whirlpool. Like a tornado, it spun at high speed and rushed toward the fire snake's inner core that was floating above his sea of qi. Whoosh! The fire snake's inner core that was floating above his sea of qi did not back down. A tyrannical red light pillar suddenly came crashing down. Boom! The two powerful forces collided together. After the confrontation, the winner was immediately decided. The fire snake's red light pillar was instantly swallowed by Yi Fan's tyrannical 5-colored light pillar. Whoosh! The 5-colored light pillar went against the flow, and in an instant, the dazzling red fire snake's inner core was completely enveloped. It formed a 5-colored ball of spiritual energy. Bang! 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 The fire snake's inner core within the 5-colored ball of light continuously spun and slammed into the wall of spiritual energy. However, it did not have any effect. After suppressing the fire snake's inner core, the 5-colored ball of light slowly descended and was submerged in the spiritual energy in his sea of qi. Who? Yi Fan, who was sitting cross-legged, slowly opened his eyes. Chapter 302. How are you? Are you all right? The youth beside him immediately asked when he saw Yi Fan open his eyes. While Yi Fan was fighting against the fire snake's inner core, he saw Yi Fan's body emit red light and multicolored light. When he saw the bloody hole in Sakitu's chest, he immediately understood what happened. Yi Fan had already absorbed the fire snake's inner core into his body. He was worried about Yi Fan's safety, but there was nothing he could do to help. He could only stop Sakitu's bleeding and wait anxiously at the side, not daring to disturb Yi Fan. Now that he saw that Yi Fan was safe and sound, the rock in his heart was finally lifted. I'm fine, Yi Fan said. How is he? He's unconscious right now, but he's fine now, the youth said sincerely. I really don't know how to thank you. Yi Fan waved his hand, and his expression became serious. Although the fire snake's inner core in his body was under control, it still took up 80% of his spiritual energy. Now, he could only freely use 20% of his spiritual energy. This way, even if he successfully obtained the Soul Return Grass, he wouldn't be able to return to Pear Blossom Palace within 2 hours. What's wrong? The youth noticed Yi Fan's abnormality and hurriedly asked. I used 80% of my spiritual energy to suppress the fire snake's inner core in my body. The remaining 20% won't be able to return to the Great Ming Dynasty within 2 hours. Yi Fan shook his head and said with a serious expression. The youth frowned after hearing this. The only thing we can do now is to find the fire snake and use its 1,000-year ice core to neutralize the fire snake's inner core in my body, Yi Fan said. He had thought of using his spiritual energy to stimulate the cold air produced by the snake's shadow sword to suppress the fire snake's inner core in his body. However, after thinking about it carefully, he didn't think it would work. The inner core was a condensation of spiritual energy, and the cold energy was not spiritual energy, so it was impossible to dissolve it. Blindly using the cold energy to resist the fire snake's inner core would only stimulate its violent flames. Not to mention that the amount of spiritual energy he could use now was not much. Apart from consuming the ice snake inner core, there was no other way. Can't I just force the fire snake's inner core out of my body? The young man asked the question that had been in his mind for a long time. An ordinary spirit core might work, but this spirit core is very different from other spirit cores, Yi Fan said to the youth. This fire snake spirit core seems to have a physical body, but that's not the case. It seems to exist, yet it doesn't. It contains 1,000-year-old flame spirit energy. Once it comes into contact with the outside air, it will instantly explode. Yi Fan frowned. This spirit core has been in the fire snake's body for 1,000 years. Its spirit energy is abundant, and its flames are extremely strong. If it explodes instantly, the consequences will be unimaginable. Yi Fan's words were not false. It had to be known that just suppressing the fire snake spirit core had taken 80% of his earth-shattering spirit core. It was easy to imagine how strong the spirit core was. If the spirit core exploded, it would be no different from self-destruction. After hearing this, the young man frowned. It's getting late. Rest early, Yi Fan said to the young man. The young man looked at Yi Fan worriedly. I'm fine. You don't have to worry, Yi Fan said. The young man nodded and lay down next to Sigil. Yi Fan closed his eyes and opened all his pores to absorb spiritual energy while thinking of a countermeasure. With the 20% of spiritual energy in his body and the leaf fire ice dragon, he didn't know if he could deal with the ice snake. What he was more worried about was if the ice snake spirit core did not work. In that case, even if he had the soul return grass, what could he do? Wouldn't he still not be able to return to Pear Blossom Palace in time? When he thought of the soul return grass, Yi Fan immediately scolded himself for being foolish. Didn't he have 3 soul return grass? Since the soul return grass could greatly increase his cultivation, why didn't he take one? That way, his spiritual energy might increase by several times. Now that Sigil had recovered, the soul return grass was useless to him. Let's do it this way. Yi Fan's heart was filled with a trace of hope. He decided to take the ice snake's spirit core first. If the ice snake's spirit core did not work, he would take 1 soul return grass. After making up his mind, Yi Fan began to concentrate on absorbing spiritual energy. Ever since he started cultivating the Qi refining chapter of the Shantian Secret Manual, he rarely used this method to absorb spiritual energy. After all, compared to the spiritual energy in the Shantian Secret Manual, the spiritual energy he absorbed was insignificant. However, the situation was different now. 80% of his spiritual energy had been used to suppress the fire snake's spirit core. He urgently needed to replenish his spiritual energy. The night was silent. The next morning, when a young man woke up, he found that Yi Fan had disappeared. Yi Fan had left. He was thinking about the soul return grass in the ice snake's cave, so he went out alone before the sun rose. Chapter 303. 5 miles away. On the wide ice, Yi Fan braved the wind and snow as he slowly walked. He gave up on flying in the air, gave up on seeing 100 miles away, and even gave up on using spirit energy to resist the cold. Good steel should be used on the blade. In order to deal with the ice snake, he had to save as much spirit energy as possible. At this time, other than the spirit energy in his Qi Sea, his 8 extraordinary meridians, bones, and even the 5-colored spirit energy in his eyes were all absorbed into his Qi Sea. Before he left, he had already calculated that he was now more than 30 miles away from the ice snake cave. With his current speed, it would be noon when he reached there. Noon was the time when the yang energy was the strongest. For the ice snake, it was also the time when its power was at its weakest. Since he did not have the advantage in terms of location, then he had to seize the opportunity in terms of timing. Yifan thought as he put his hand to his mouth to warm himself. After all the spirit energy in his body returned to his qi, he was no different from a normal person. Without the support of spirit energy, Yifan once again felt the cold that he had not felt in a long time. The wind blew on his face like knives. At this time, his eyes, nostrils, and beard were all frozen with a layer of white frost. Off! Yifan breathed out hot air as he walked step by step towards the ice snake cave. Chico, hold on a little longer. Yifan began to talk to himself in the wind and snow. It won't be long before we husband and wife reunite again. Wait for me. 5 miles, 10 miles, 15 miles. Yifan used 4 hours to walk more than 20 miles. Ever since he obtained his spirit energy cultivation, this was the first time he had walked such a long distance. Less than 5 miles away from the ice snake cave, Yifan thought as he looked up at the sun in the sky. Day by day, noon was coming. Huff! Yifan sat on a block of ice as he panted and began to move the spirit energy in his qi around his body. He was not far from the ice snake's cave. He could no longer rely on his legs to walk. Otherwise, the ice snake would hear his footsteps. What he needed to do now was to recover his strength and conserve his energy so that he could kill this 1,000-year-old ice snake in one strike at 1/4 noon. Yifan, who was almost frozen stiff, felt the return of his strength when his spiritual energy began to circulate again. The frost on his face quickly melted, and his eyes regained their vitality. His limbs and bones were once again filled with great power. Phew! Yifan let out a long sigh. Then, he slowly closed his eyes and used his keen sense of hearing to carefully search for any movements 5 kilometers away. However, Yifan's face immediately turned pale when he heard this. There was indeed an astonishingly large cave 5 miles away, but there was more than one ice snake in this cave. 5 ice snakes, 2 big ones and 3 small ones. Yifan opened his eyes. With his current spiritual energy, it was still unknown if he could deal with 1 ice snake, but if he had to deal with 2 ice snakes, he would definitely lose. What to do? Should he advance or retreat? If he advanced, he would definitely lose. If he was not careful, he would become the ice snake's food. If he retreated, he could protect himself, but he would lose the soul returning immortal grass that he had painstakingly found. Between advancing and retreating, Yifan did not hesitate to choose the former. Clang! Yifan reached out and pulled out the flaming sword from its sheath. Well, he also pulled out the snake shadow sword from his waist. No matter what price he had to pay, he must obtain the soul returning immortal grass. Yifan thought as he began to move his spiritual energy, displaying his exceptional movement technique. Shwa! Yifan's figure instantly disappeared and turned into a white light that soared into the sky. After the white light soared into the clouds, it did not stop and flew directly to the huge ice cave 5 kilometers away. Shwa! The distance of 5 kilometers was covered in the blink of an eye. Yifan stopped high in the sky and looked down at the huge ice cave that was emitting cold air. This ice cave was slanted into the ice surface. Yifan used his hearing to carefully listen to the movements inside. From the sound analysis, this cave was at least a few hundred feet deep. If it was in the past, with Yifan's temper, he would have directly used his spiritual energy to collapse the ice cave. That way, it would be easy and efficient. But today was different. Not only could he not destroy this ice cave, he had to carefully protect it. The reason was very simple. This ice cave had what he wanted, the soul returning immortal grass. Once the ice cave collapsed, all of his efforts would be wasted. Shwa! Yifan, who was high up in the sky, instantly withdrew the spiritual energy that he had used to activate his movement technique. He then fell from the sky as if he was in a free fall. Shwa! The ice surface in front of him was getting closer and closer. Yifan heard the whistling of the wind, but he did not slow down. Boom! Yifan's feet stepped on the ice surface, creating a huge roar. This method of landing was the fastest and also saved spiritual energy. He now had to be careful with his spiritual energy. The huge roar directly woke up the ice snake sleeping in the ice cave. Just as Yifan had predicted, this was the time of the day when the yang energy was the strongest. It was also the time when the ice snake was the weakest. Every day at this time, the ice snake would hide in the ice cave and sleep. Seeing that its beautiful dream was disturbed, the ice snake was somewhat unhappy. It got up and shook its huge head. Then, it followed the wide, winding ice cave to the ice surface outside the cave. When the ice snake saw that the person who came was Yifan, it was shocked. It thought that the sound outside was caused by the collapse of one of the ice mountains. It never thought that the person who came was the silver-haired boy who had sent it flying with a punch yesterday. Roar! When the enemy met, the ice snake's eyes turned red. It immediately roared towards the sky. Give me the inner core and the soul-returning immortal grass, and I won't kill you. Yifan, who was holding 2 divine weapons, said coldly. Roar! The ice snake's roar was its answer. It shrunk its neck and then suddenly stretched it forward. A thick white beam of light instantly rushed towards Yifan. Shwa! Yifan narrowed his eyes and used his movement technique to quickly move to the side. Chapter 304. Shwa! Yifan's figure appeared on the other side. He did not make a move. He was waiting for an opportunity to kill with one move. Roar! Just as the ice snake was about to make another move, an even louder roar came from the bottomless ice cave. Whoosh! A huge wave of air gushed out from the hole in an instant. The huge ice chunks that had been smashed by the ice snake were instantly blown away by this overbearing wave of air and landed on the ground with a loud bang. Following this furious roar, 2 faint green lights shot out from the depths of the cave. Another one came out. As Yifan thought about it, he flew backward and retreated more than 100 feet. His face was solemn. Based on the sound, the one that came out later was even bigger than the one in front of him. Hua! 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 The sound of scales sliding on the ice was getting closer and closer. The faint green light shot out from the cave. A 6 feet thick snake head stretched out from the bottomless cave. What a huge snake! Yifan exclaimed in his heart. Compared to the previous snake, this snake was at least twice as thick. What troubled Yifan even more was that the ice snake that had appeared later had a silver horn that was more than 10 feet long on its head. This ice snake was about to transform into a flood dragon. Yifan began to feel the pressure. The cultivation of this ice snake in front of him was probably several times stronger than the previous ice snake. It was still unknown who would emerge victorious in today's fierce battle. Hua! The horned ice snake slowly crawled out of the ice cave. Its 100 feet long, thick body was piled up like a small mountain. Hiss! Seeing the horned ice snake come out of the cave, the previous ice snake stopped attacking Yifan. It affectionately rubbed its huge head against the horned silver snake. The horned silver snake first lowered its head and touched the hornless silver snake's forehead. Then it turned its head. As it lowered its head, it looked at Yifan with its pair of faint green snake eyes. Yifan could see that this was a couple of ice snakes. The hornless one was the female snake. The horned one was the male snake. Hiss! The horned ice snake spat out its blood-red tongue as it circled around Yifan. It was observing Yifan. Yifan stood there quietly, constantly turning his head to look at the horned ice snake. Hiss! The horned ice snake's eyes were extremely cold. Unknowingly, it had already circled Yifan several times with its huge head aimed at Yifan. Hiss! The female snake at the side let out a hiss, as if urging the horned ice snake to attack. Shwa! Right after the female snake hissed, the horned silver snake's enormous body, which had already coiled several times, instantly tightened. It was so fast that it only took a blink of an eye. Shwa! Yifan's figure instantly disappeared from the spot. Bang! The horned ice serpent's huge body was tightly coiled together. Its scales collided with each other, creating a loud sound. Shwa! Yifan's figure instantly appeared high up in the sky. The horned ice snake immediately raised its head and looked at the sky. High up in the sky, Yifan, who had a grave and stern expression on his face, suddenly activated his movement technique and descended from the sky. At this moment, he did not activate the two divine weapons in his hands. Before he found the ice snake's weak point, he could not casually activate the divine weapons. He had to constantly use his movement skill to provoke the ice snake and make it go berserk. This was because all animals were the same. When they were angry, they would expose their weaknesses. Shwa! Yifan's figure quickly descended, heading straight for the horned silver snake. The horned silver snake below squinted its eyes and suddenly slammed its tail on the ice. Boom! Ice shards flew everywhere. Its huge body instantly bounced up at high speed and rushed straight up. The horned silver snake's speed was actually not inferior to Yifan's falling speed. It opened its bloody mouth, which was several feet wide, and bit down on Yifan, who was falling from the sky. In the huge mouth, four huge snake fangs that were more than 10 feet long shone with a cold white light under the sunlight. The man and the snake met in the sky. Kacha! When Yifan arrived in front of the ice serpent, the single-horned ice serpent immediately closed its bloody mouth. The strength of a huge snake's bite was no less than 10,000 Jin. If Yifan was bitten, Yifan would definitely die. Shwa! Yifan activated his movement skill and quickly floated up before the snake's mouth closed, dodging the deadly attack of the horned ice snake. At this time, the ice snake had already closed its mouth, and Yifan was just above its head. The distance between them was less than 3 feet. Now is the time. Yifan squinted his eyes, and a murderous intent appeared. While the horned ice snake's head was completely exposed in front of him, he would take its life with one move. In a flash, Yifan suddenly activated his peerless movement skill and quickly rushed down. At the same time, he circulated the spiritual energy in his dantian and activated the two peerless divine weapons in his hands. Clang! The red light of the dantian suddenly burst out, and the flames rose. Buzz! The white light of the frost dragon sword was dazzling, and the cold air exploded. Shwa! Yifan, who was holding two divine weapons, used the two divine weapons in his hands to viciously stab at the head of the ice snake. If nothing unexpected happened, the ice snake's brain would definitely burst open, and it would die on the spot. However, Yifan's thinking was too simple. Even though the top of the ice snake's head was completely exposed to Yifan, the ice snake still had a silver horn that was over 10 feet long. At this time, the horn was aimed at Yifan. Shwa! At the same time that Yifan's two swords stabbed down at high speed, a 3-foot-thick silver light beam instantly shot out from the horn and rushed towards Yifan, who was 3 feet away. At the same time that Yifan was scheming against the ice snake, the ice snake was also scheming against him. This young man's intentions were all within its expectations. How many years had Yifan lived? How many years had it lived? Chapter 305. The moment the silver beam of light shot towards Yifan, Yifan immediately understood the true intentions of the horned ice serpent. What a good trick. What a good trick to beat me in my own game. Only now did he realize that his scheme had already been exposed in front of the horned ice serpent. Shwa! The silver beam of light reached Yifan in the blink of an eye and was less than 3 feet away from him. Seeing the beam of light approaching, Yifan did not dare to be negligent. At this moment, he had no time to dodge. In a moment of desperation, he immediately crossed his two swords in front of his chest and changed from offense to defense. Boom! White lights splashed in all directions, red lights swirled in the air, and silver light dazzled. Yifan's two swords forcibly blocked the beam of light from the horned silver serpent. But even so, Yifan's body was still sent flying by the beam of light and retreated more than 10 feet. If this continued, it would be a waste of spiritual energy. Yifan used all his strength to resist the beam of light from the ice serpent as he quickly thought of a way to deal with it. Not only was this ice serpent's cultivation high, it was also extremely intelligent. If he wanted to defeat it, just relying on his cultivation was far from enough. He had to come up with a strange move. Yifan's gaze landed on the ground as he pondered. When he saw the female serpent on the glacier, he suddenly had a flash of inspiration and a brilliant idea appeared in his mind. That's what I'll do. Yifan first pulled out his two swords and then mobilized 20% of his spiritual energy to push his body to the limit. Shwa! A ray of white light rapidly descended from the sky. His target was no longer the horned ice serpent, but the female serpent below. He wanted to take advantage of the fact that the female serpent was focused on the battle and was unprepared to take its life and obtain its inner core. As long as he obtained the inner core of the ice serpent, the inner core of the fire snake in his body would be neutralized. In that case, his spiritual energy would be completely under his control. At that time, not to mention one-horned silver serpent, even if there were 10 of them, they would not be able to do anything to him. With 20% of his spiritual energy, Yifan's speed reached its peak. In the blink of an eye, he had rushed from a height of over 1,000 feet to 3 inches from the female snake. At this moment, the female snake on the ground was watching the battle with rapt attention. She did not expect Yifan to suddenly launch a sneak attack on her. By the time she reacted, the ever-flame sword in Yifan's hand was already fiercely stabbing down at her 3 inches. Shwa! Just as Yifan's sword was about to pierce 3 inches away from the female snake, a ray of silver light shot down for the sky. It was the horned silver snake. Never in its wildest dreams would it have thought that Yifan would suddenly attack the female snake while they were fighting. Seeing that its wife was on the verge of death, it was eager to save her. Without any time to think, it quickly descended and activated its life's core. From its horn, an extremely strong beam of cold chi shot towards the ever-fire sword in Yifan's hand. It wanted to knock away Yifan's fleeting flame sword. Boom! The silver light flashed and the red light shone. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, the silver beam of light that descended from the sky accurately struck Yifan's flaming sword. However, what the single-horned silver snake did not expect was that even though its icy light beam had struck Yifan's treasured sword, it had only managed to deflect it. At this moment, Yifan had already used 20% of his spiritual energy. Even though the ever-flame sword in his hand had been deflected, it still managed to pierce the female snake's body. Pooh! After the sword pierced in, it went straight to the hilt. Chi! The fleeting flame sword and the 1,000-year ice snake were mutually reinforcing and restraining each other. Therefore, after the sword pierced into the female snake's wound quickly emitted steam. Roar! The female snake instantly howled in pain. It twisted its huge body that was over 100 feet long and violently churned on the wide ice surface. At the moment when the female snake was churning, Yifan pulled out the fleeting flame sword. Pooh! After Yifan pulled out the sword, a pillar of blood immediately gushed out from the female snake's wound. The blood dyed the ice surface red. The originally sparkling and translucent glacier immediately turned into a river of blood. At the same time, Yifan's moon-white robe was also dyed red. Plop! Ice dust flew everywhere as the female snake's body fell into a pool of blood. Although Yifan's fleeting flame sword did not injure any vital parts, the surging heat of the fleeting flame sword instantly caused the female snake to lose all of its strength. Roar! Just as Yifan was about to use his spiritual energy to extract the female snake's core, the horned silver snake in the sky roared as it lowered its head. It used its 10-feet-long silver horn to stab at Yifan. After the female snake fell to the ground, it had completely lost its calm and reason. It even forgot that it had a cultivation base. At this time, it only had animal instincts. seeing the horned ice snake rushing towards him. Yi Fan's figure moved, and he retreated over 100 feet. Boom! Ice shards flew everywhere as silver dust flew everywhere. The horned silver snake's 10 feet long horn smashed into the ground where Yi Fan was standing a moment ago, creating a huge ice hole that was 50 feet wide. The huge force instantly penetrated the ice layer, and because the horned silver snake had used too much strength, it plunged into the ice layer. Taking advantage of the fact that the horned silver snake had not yet pulled its head out of the ice layer, Yi Fan shook the long sword in his hand and once again pierced the fleeting flame sword into the horned ice snake's body. Pooh! The fleeting flame sword pierced deeply into the ice layer. Chi! White mist rose again as blood spurted out. Roar! Under the intense pain, the horned ice snake used its huge head to break through the ice layer, creating a huge ice rain. Plop! After the horned ice snake writhed on the glacier for a while, it lost all of its strength and fell heavily into a pool of blood. Yi Fan stepped forward and pulled out the treasure sword from the horned ice snake's body. He slowly inserted it into the scabbard on his back. The two horned ice snakes in front of him were no longer a threat to him. What he needed to do now was to take out the horned ice snake's core and consume it to neutralize the fire snake's core in his body. Chapter 306. He decided to take the female snake's core first and see if it could neutralize the fire snake's core in his body. If it could, that would be the best. If the female snake's core didn't have enough spiritual energy, then he would take the male snake's core. Just as Yi Fan was about to mobilize his spiritual energy to extract the female snake's core, the horned silver snake beside him moved. It struggled to lift its huge snake head and slowly slithered towards Yi Fan along the bloody ice surface. Yi Fan frowned. He didn't understand what the horned silver snake wanted to do. In its current situation, not to mention fighting with him, even crawling back into the ice cave would be a problem. Buzz! The horned ice snake's closed mouth suddenly emitted a bright light. Seeing this, Yi Fan immediately got up and looked at the horned ice snake vigilantly. He thought that the horned ice snake wanted to fight to the death with him. Buzz! As the horned ice snake slightly opened its mouth, a walnut-sized silver light bead slowly flew out of its mouth and floated towards Yi Fan. Life core! Seeing this, Yi Fan's heart skipped a beat, and he frowned. In order to save his wife, the male snake didn't hesitate to give his 1,000-year frost core to him. Yi Fan reached out and gently held the frost core floating in front of him. Buzz! After the core was spat out, the silver horn on the male snake's head flashed and disappeared in an instant. At the same time, its pair of green eyes began to lose their luster. Boom! The male snake fell beside the female snake. Its pair of dim eyes quietly looked at the female snake. Its gaze was full of tenderness. Hiss! Seeing the male snake fall to the ground, the female snake forced her body to move her head closer to the male snake. She hissed in pain and rubbed her head against the male snake. 2 lines of crystal clear tears flowed from the corner of the male snake's eyes. The female snake kept rubbing her head against the male snake. Her voice was sad and mournful. Yi Fan's hands began to tremble. The ice snake couple in front of him reminded him of himself and Fujiwara no Chico. He also thought of Baihu Xiao Zhao, who had risked her life to save his. He suddenly felt that he was an animal, even worse than an animal. This pair of ice snakes had no enmity with him, but he wanted to kill them and steal their inner cores. Why? Just because he had this ability? Then what was the difference between him and Inchandacion? What was the difference between him and the evil Taoist who killed Xiao Zhao's parents? There was no difference. He looked at the pair of ice snakes lying in a pool of blood, then looked at his blood-stained white robe and hands. His heart began to tear apart. He was no different from the Demon King. Roar! Just as Yi Fan was struggling internally, the female snake suddenly reared her head back and roared, her voice echoing to the heavens. Then it swung its head and smashed into the ice. It wanted to die with this male snake. Don't! Yi Fan shouted. Bang! The glacier trembled and ice shards flew everywhere. Yifan's voice was drowned out by this loud noise. The ice dust dispersed. The female snake lay quietly on the ice, her eyes gazing at the male snake lying on the side with tears in her eyes. Hiss, hiss, hiss. In the ice cave, 3 ice snakes slowly crawled out. These 3 ice snakes were about 10 feet long. At a glance, one could tell that they were newly born. When the 3 little snakes saw their parents lying in a pool of blood, they immediately whimpered and crawled forward, constantly rubbing their heads against their parents' foreheads. Hiss, hiss, hiss. When the 3 little snakes saw that their parents were not moving, they immediately hissed sadly. Yifan's eyes turned red. He suddenly flew in front of the 2 ice snakes. First, he stuffed the glowing inner cores into the male snake's mouth. Then, he pressed his palms on the heads of the 2 ice snakes, mobilizing the remaining spiritual power in his body to heal the 2 snakes. Wong! A tyrannical 5-colored spiritual power surged out from Yifan's chi-si, rushing through Yifan's palms into the bodies of the 2 giant snakes. Wong! As the inner cores returned to the male snake's body, coupled with the circulation of Yifan's spiritual power, the male snake's body began to emit a faint white light, and the silver horn on its forehead began to grow again. The huge eyes of the male snake began to gradually recover its vitality. The 3 little snakes seemed to know that Yifan was saving their parents. They anxiously waited at the side, constantly moving back and forth. On the other side, because the inner cores of the female snake were still there, other than external injuries, there were no major problems. Yifan condensed pure spiritual power on the wounds on its forehead and abdomen, constantly healing it. The wounds of the 2 ice snakes were quickly healing at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the 20% of spiritual power that Yifan could control in his chi-si began to gradually dry up. Yifan's forehead began to exude dense beads of sweat. As the wounds of the 2 ice snakes were completely healed, Yifan's 20% of spiritual power was completely exhausted. He withdrew his palms and sat cross-legged, his face pale and his body weak. Right now, he was no different from an ordinary person. Swoosh! The scales of the male snake moved, and the first to wake up. It slowly raised its neck, and then shook its huge head as if it had just woken up. Seeing that their father had woken up, the 3 little snakes quickly slithered in front of the male snake, intimately rubbing their heads against the body of the male snake. The male snake used its head to nudge the heads of the little snakes a few times, and then immediately slithered in front of the female snake, constantly nudging the female snake with its head. The female snake began to gradually wake up. When she saw that the male snake and her children were safe and sound, the female snake seemed to be somewhat in disbelief. The male snake hissed at the female snake, and then looked at Yifan, who was meditating. The female snake looked back at the wound on her abdomen that had already healed, and then looked at the silver horn on the forehead of the male snake, and suddenly understood everything. She put the head of the snake directly in front of Yifan, and then the snake opened its mouth and held Yifan in its mouth. Yifan, who was in the snake's mouth, had a calm expression and did not say a word. If I die, then I die, Yifan thought. I stabbed them twice with my sword. This time they would definitely not spare me, and might even feed me to one of the little snakes for breakfast. Now, 80% of his spiritual power was contained by the fire snake's inner core, and the other 20% was used to save the snake couple. Chapter 307. When Yifan woke up again, it was already 2 hours later. He opened his eyes and immediately sat up. He was still alive and had not been eaten by the ice snake. This must be the ice snake's lair. Yifan looked at the surrounding ice walls as he stood up. Just as Yifan was looking at the ice cave, the horned ice snake's voice came from behind Yifan. Yifan turned around and calmly looked at the male snake in front of him. Behind the male snake, there were 3 small snakes. Looking at the male snake in front of him, Yifan did not feel afraid because it was useless to be afraid. In his current state, not to mention the male and female snakes, Even the 3 small snakes could eat him in an instant. Plop! The male snake opened its huge mouth, and a 3 feet-long fish fell out of its mouth. Fish! Yifan frowned and looked at the male snake. What is the meaning of this? Do you want to fatten me up and swallow me in one bite? Yifan asked. This male snake had cultivated for more than 1,000 years and had developed intelligence. It should be able to understand human language. The male snake looked at Yifan and spat out its tongue as it turned around and left. The 3 small snakes did not leave. They directly slithered to Yifan's side and tried to touch Yifan with their snake heads. It was obvious that they had a good impression of Yifan because in their eyes, Yifan was the savior of their parents. However, they were afraid of the Everflame sword on Yifan's back. The heat from the Everflame sword made them feel very uneasy. After discovering that they were not hostile, Yifan removed the Everflame sword from his back and put it aside. The 3 small ice snakes were relieved and kept rubbing their heads intimately against Yifan's palm. Seeing this, Yifan couldn't help but laugh. These 3 little snakes only knew that he had saved their parents. If they knew the whole truth of the matter, they would have torn him into pieces long ago. Yifan thought as he stroked the little snake with his hand. Buzz! The fire snake's inner core in Yifan's chi suddenly trembled. Zzz! A red electric light shot out from Yifan's chest and rushed up Yifan's neck to Yifan's head. The red electric light frightened the 3 little snakes around him. Although they were small snakes, they had innate instincts. They keenly sensed that the red electric light emitted from Yifan's body was extremely hot. Hiss! The 3 little snakes quickly retreated 3 meters and looked at Yifan warily. What happened? Yifan frowned. He had clearly used 80% of his spiritual power to suppress the fire snake's inner core. So why did the inner core suddenly release heat? Thinking of this, Yifan immediately sat cross-legged and meditated. He looked at the fire snake's inner core in the depths of his chi. Inside his chi, the fire snake's inner core was still rampaging inside the 5-color ball of light. Although it still looked anxious, there was nothing unusual. This was strange. Yifan began to wonder. Since the fire snake's inner core was still firmly suppressed, then what was the red light just now? Was it an illusion? No, it wasn't an illusion. If it was an illusion, the little snakes wouldn't have such a reaction. Yifan racked his brains for a long time before he finally understood the reason behind it. It turned out that the fire snake and the ice snake were spiritual creatures of heaven and earth. They were natural enemies. Although Yifan had used 80% of his spiritual power to suppress the fire snake's inner core, he could still keenly sense the existence of his nemesis. Who was his nemesis? It wasn't Yifan, but the ice snake. Just now, when Yifan was stroking the little ice snake's head, the fire snake's inner core in his body had sensed the ice snake's existence. As the saying goes, when enemies meet, their eyes turn red. The fire snake's inner core was enraged by the ice snake's inner core. Coupled with the fact that Yifan was currently extremely weak, the fire snake's inner core released a trace of heat in its fury, resulting in the red light just now. However, this scene was coincidentally witnessed by the ice snake couple who had rushed over after hearing the news. This time, they finally understood why Yifan wanted to take their ice snake's inner core. The fire snake's inner core in this young man's body was emitting heat. If it wasn't for the powerful spiritual power suppressing it, this person would have been burned to ashes by the overbearing heat of the inner core. Hiss! The male snake turned its head towards the female snake and hissed. Hiss! The female snake seemed to be a little impatient. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The male snake seemed to be comforting the female snake. It hissed softly and used its head to lightly touch the female snake's head. The female snake lowered her head and no longer made a sound. Yifan knew that the snake couple was discussing something, but he didn't understand the snake language, so he didn't know what they were talking about. However, he was sure that the snake couple wouldn't eat him. No matter how fat he was, how many pounds would he weigh? Judging from the snake couple's body, his 100 pounds wouldn't even be enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. Swish! The male snake used its scales to rub against the ice surface, and slowly slithered in front of Yifan. What did this male snake want to do? Yifan didn't understand the intentions of the male snake. Just as Yifan was puzzled, the male snake's body began to emit a layer of soft white light. As the light on the male snake's body became brighter and brighter, a dazzling silver light began to slowly move from the male snake's belly to the snake's head. Swish! The snake slightly opened its mouth, and a dazzling silver bead slowly flew out of the male snake's mouth and floated towards Yifan. It was the ice core. This male snake actually took the initiative to hand over the ice core to him. Yifan used his hand to hold the dazzling ice core while looking at the male snake with a puzzled expression. Once the ice core came out, the male snake's silver horn began to gradually disappear, and the green light in its eyes became dim again. Hiss! The female snake slithered to the side of the male snake and continuously rubbed its head against the male snake's neck with tears in its eyes. The male snake lightly nudged the female snake and then quietly stared at Yifan. "You gave me the ice core, what will you do?" Yifan opened his mouth and asked the male snake. Hiss! The male snake softly hissed and slithered in front of Yifan. It used its head to nudge the back of Yifan's hand. Yifan understood that the male snake wanted him to swallow the ice core now. Just as Yifan was hesitating, the fire snake's ice core in his body suddenly became furious. A red electric light, as thick as a thumb, shot out from his chest and rushed along Yifan's arm to the ice core in his hand. The fire snake's ice core had already felt the cold energy of its sworn enemy. Hiss! The ice core instantly shone brightly, and a silver electric light shot out, quickly meeting the red electric light. Bang! A white mist rose from Yifan's arm. The fire snake's ice core in his chi began to become restless, and the red light rose sharply. Hiss! Hiss! The male snake let out a hurried hiss at Yifan. Chapter 308. If he didn't swallow it now, he might not be able to suppress the raging fire snake's inner core with 80% of his spiritual energy. After Yifan swallowed the male snake's inner core, he immediately felt a cooling sensation. It was very comfortable, and the heat in his body also began to gradually ease. This inner core was indeed useful. Shwa! Just when Yifan thought that he was about to recover his spiritual energy, the inner core that had just entered his body suddenly rushed towards his chi. Not good. Yifan's pupils instantly contracted. This inner core had to be found by the fire snake's inner core. Once the two met, the power that would be aroused would definitely be terrifying. At that time, not only would he be instantly crushed, even the ice snake's cave would collapse in an instant. Yifan didn't have time to think. He immediately sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes. Shwa! In the blink of an eye, the inner core had already rushed to the top of his chi. Bang! 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 The raging fire snake's inner core crazily collided with the five-colored spiritual energy ball that was suppressing it. From time to time, it would release a few red lightning bolts towards the inner walls of the spiritual energy ball. Shwa! When the inner core saw the fire snake's inner core, it instantly glowed brightly and rushed straight down. Shwa! The fire snake's inner core didn't show any signs of weakness and instantly rushed forward. Bang! The inner core collided with the five-colored spiritual energy ball. Bang! The fire snake's inner core also collided with the spiritual energy ball. When enemies met, their eyes would turn red. The two inner cores were firmly pressed against each other. He definitely couldn't let them touch each other. Yifan was alarmed. At this time, if it wasn't for the spiritual energy ball separating the two, he was afraid that he would have already been crushed and turned into ashes. At this time, his 80% spiritual energy was barely enough to control the fire snake's inner core. He didn't have any extra spiritual energy to control the inner core. If he allowed them to continue colliding like this, the spiritual energy ball wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Right now, he had to borrow the strength of one side to suppress the other. Wong. Just when Yi Fan was thinking of a countermeasure, the snake's shadow sword that was coiled around his body let out a crisp sound. It was the snake's shadow sword. Yi Fan frowned at first, then his eyes lit up. That's it. Using the cold air of the snake's shadow sword, Yi Fan thought, using the cold qi to control the ice core. In this way, not only could he use the cold energy of the snake's shadow sword to restrain Han Bing's inner core, but he could also increase the pressure on the fire snake's inner core and reduce the impact of the spiritual energy ball. It could be said to be killing two birds with one stone. The snake's shadow sword was reminding him, "All right, let's do that." As Yi Fan thought about this, he quickly used his will to guide the cold air from the snake's shadow sword into his body. Wong. The serpent shadow sword emitted a crisp sound, followed by a bright white light. A streak of white lightning shot out from the sword, following Yi Fan's dantian and straight into his qi si. Shua. As soon as the white lightning entered his qi si, it quickly wrapped around the ice inner core that was shining with a silver light. The ice inner core was condensed from cold qi, so it didn't conflict with the cold qi emitted by the snake's shadow sword. Therefore, when the cold qi from the snake's shadow sword wrapped around the ice inner core didn't resist at all. After the ice inner core was suppressed by the white lightning from the snake's shadow sword, the raging fire snake's inner core began to gradually calm down. After all, its nemesis was also suppressed at this time. The intervention of a third party caused the originally incompatible forces to instantly calm down. At this time, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that his body was shining with a myriad of colors. The red color of the fire snake's raging flame core, the silver color of the ice snake's freezing ice core, the white color of the snake shadow sword's cold qi, and the colorful spiritual energy ball. What kind of qi si was this? This was simply a gathering of colors. Yi Fan bitterly smiled. Phew! As he thought about this, he let out a long breath and slowly opened his eyes. Right now, his body could be said to be a mess. Although there weren't any major problems, the problem of his spiritual energy still hadn't been solved. The powerful 80% of his spiritual energy was still suppressing the fire snake's inner core. There was only one way left, and that was to eat a stalk of soul return grass. If eating the soul return grass still didn't work, then he could only take the risk and cultivate the third stage of the mysterious sky secret manual. Phoenix dances in the ninth heaven. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he didn't want to cultivate the third stage, because cultivating the third stage of the Phoenix dances in the ninth heaven would lead to the first heavenly tribulation. Let's take it one step at a time, Yi Fan thought to himself. If things really reached that point, he wouldn't have any other choice. Hiss! Seeing that Yi Fan was safe and sound, the three small snakes once again surrounded Yi Fan. After touching the three small snakes, Yi Fan looked at the male snake that had lost all of its spiritual energy. Then he stretched out his hand and took out a red bead that was surrounded by a red light. This was none other than Enchantation's inner core. Hiss! The red bead in Yi Fan's hand immediately attracted the attention of the two large snakes. Although this inner core doesn't have any cold qi, it's still been around for 1,000 years. It's full of spiritual energy. As Yi Fan spoke, he handed the red bead in his hand to the male snake. Since you've given me the inner core, I'll give this to you. Hiss! The male snake lowered its head and looked at the red bead in Yi Fan's hand. Then, it raised its head and looked at Yi Fan. After a long time, it opened its mouth and sucked in the red bead in Yi Fan's hand. Hua! As soon as the red bead entered the snake's mouth, the male snake's head immediately emitted a red light. The inner core slowly flowed down the male snake's body. Wherever it passed, the red light covered the snake's body. It was very beautiful. Wong. The male snake's head flashed with a silver light, and the silver horn regrew. Chapter 309. This Enchantation was good at sucking other people's spiritual energy, so the inner core in his body was naturally full of spiritual energy. This. The female snake saw that her husband's spiritual energy had returned and was overjoyed. Hiss! The three little snakes were also surprised by their father's change and quickly surrounded him. Looking at the male snake who had recovered his spiritual energy, Yi Fan's heart calmed down. He originally wanted to leave this inner core of enchantation for Xiao Zhao, but Xiao Zhao refused to use it, so he kept it with him. He planned to wait for the day when Xiao Zhao changed her mind and let her use it. Now that the male snake had given him the 1,000-year ice inner core and had lost all his spiritual energy, Yi Fan gave the inner core to the male snake to express his gratitude. Hiss! After the male snake recovered his spiritual energy, he nodded at Yi Fan 3 times. "You don't have to thank me. I have something to ask of you," Yi Fan said to the male snake. Hiss! The male snake gently hissed and tilted his head, as if waiting for Yi Fan to continue. "I want to save my wife, so I want you to give me 2 soul return grass. Is that okay?" Yi Fan asked the male snake. Hiss! After the male snake heard Yi Fan's words, he was stunned at first, then turned his head to the female snake. Hiss! The female snake hesitated for a moment, then nodded at the male snake, then turned around and slithered into the depths of the ice cave. Hiss! The male snake turned his head and nodded at Yi Fan. "That's great." The ice snake couple agreed to give him the soul return grass. Yi Fan excitedly thought. He was already prepared for the other party to reject him. After all, the soul return grass belonged to them. He thought that if the other party refused, he would immediately go to the other glaciers to look for it. The extreme north was so big, it was impossible for the soul return grass to only be found in this place. However, the spiritual energy in his body was restricted by the inner core, so it would be difficult to find the soul return grass in other places. Now that the ice snake couple had agreed to his request, Chico could be saved. 2 stalks of soul returning grass, one for himself to consume and the other for Chico to consume. Then, the 2 of them could be reunited. At the thought of his beloved wife coming back to life soon, Yi Fan was overjoyed. Hiss! The male snake hissed softly at Yi Fan a few times, then turned around and followed the female snake into the depths of the ice cave. Yi Fan did not understand snake language. He stood there in a daze, his face full of confusion. Hiss! Hiss! When the 3 little snakes saw that Yi Fan was frozen in place, they immediately slithered to Yi Fan's side. One of them bit Yi Fan's lapel, one circled around Yi Fan, and the last one slithered behind Yi Fan and used its head to poke Yi Fan's waist. Yi Fan understood that the little snakes wanted him to follow their parents. Could it be that they wanted to bring him to get the soul-returning grass? When Yi Fan thought of this, he immediately followed behind the ice snake couple and walked into the depths of the ice cave. There were many forks in the ice cave, and the bottom could not be seen. Yi Fan walked for almost an hour before he finally arrived at the end of the ice cave with the snakes. At the end, an extremely huge ice pit came into view. The ice pit was several hundred feet wide and several hundred feet deep. There were thousands of icicles in the pit, and every one of them was extremely sharp, flashing with cold light. In the middle of the ice pit, 4 stalks of soul-returning grass were quietly growing there. These 4 stalks of soul-returning grass were as white as jade, 3 big and 1 small. The big one was more than 3 feet tall, and the flower bud at the top was the size of a palm. The small one was only 1 foot tall, and the flower bud was only the size of a thumb. Soul returning grass. Yi Fan came to the side of the ice pit and blurted out, "Hiss!" The female snake first let out a hiss, then gently leaned her head against the male snake's head, quietly looking at the soul returning grass in the depths of the ice pit. Hiss! The male snake rubbed his head against the female snake, as if comforting her. Yi Fan looked at the soul-returning grass in the ice pit and then looked at the ice snake couple's reaction. He suddenly understood everything. These 4 stalks of soul-returning grass must be the treasures that the ice snake couple was preparing to use to pass the tribulation. They had cultivated for more than 1,000 years, and the male snake had already grown horns on his head, about to turn into a flood dragon. It wouldn't take long for the heavenly tribulation to descend on the male snake first. Among the 4 stalks of soul-returning grass, 3 of them were about to bloom. If they ate each of them, their spiritual power would definitely increase greatly, and they would successfully pass the tribulation. Now, the soul-returning grass was not as simple as a soul-returning treasure. It was the life of these 2 ice snakes. However, among the 3 stalks of soul-returning grass that were about to bloom, he needed 2. In other words, only one of the snake couple could eat the soul-returning grass. If the heavenly tribulation descended before the remaining stalk bloomed, the other snake would very likely be blown away by the heavenly thunder and turned into ashes. I changed my mind. You can just give me 1 stalk. Yi Fan turned to the 2 ice snakes and said, "You can keep the remaining 2 for your tribulation." After hearing Yi Fan's words, the snake couple immediately turned to look at Yi Fan, their eyes full of surprise. They were very puzzled by the young man in front of them. This person first fought with them and seriously injured them. When they thought that they were both going to die, this young man saved them. In order to repay this person for not killing it, the male snake gave the millennium-chilling ice pill to this person to dissolve the fire snake's inner core in this person's body. It didn't expect this person to return the favor and give it a millennium spirit pill. When they learned that this person was looking for the soul-returning grass to save his wife, they agreed without hesitation. After all, saving a life was better than building a 7-floor pagoda. For them, it was a good opportunity to accumulate merits. However, they didn't expect this person to see through their difficulties and change the original 2 stalks of soul-returning grass into 1. This young man's cultivation was profound, and he was both good and evil. He was completely different from those greedy people they had met before. The couple had cultivated for more than 1,000 years, but they still couldn't see through this silver-haired young man. Yi Fan smiled and turned his head, quietly looking at the soul-returning grass below. Now, he only had one way left, the only way. Chapter 3:10. Beside the soul-returning grass, Yi Fan was sitting cross-legged on the ice surface. He was concentrating on refining his qi and absorbing spiritual energy. What he needed to do now was to recover the 20% of spirit energy in his body. Without strong spirit energy as a buffer, it was impossible to cultivate to a higher level. The mysterious sky's secret path had 9 levels, each stronger than the last, but also more dangerous than the last. He had only cultivated rock-shattering heaven for a few days. If he cultivated the 3rd level, Phoenix Dance's 9 heavens, then he would be tired of living. However, he could only do this now. There was no other way. Perhaps this was his destiny, Yi Fan thought to himself. He did his best, and whether or not he could successfully pass his first tribulation would depend on the arrangements of the heavens. Birds fly in 1,000 mountains. People disappear on 10,000 paths. Fishermen on a lone boat, fishing alone in the snow. Just as Yi Fan was absorbing spirit energy, a clear voice floated into Yi Fan's ears from outside the cave. "Someone's here." Yi Fan suddenly opened his eyes. The soul-returning grass would bloom in at most 2 days. If someone could find this place, then they must be here for it. Thinking of this, Yi Fan immediately picked up the distant flame sword beside him. Using his movement technique, he floated a foot above the ground and quickly floated towards the entrance of the ice cave. At this time, he had already recovered 10% of his spirit energy. Although it was only 10% of his spirit energy, the power was extraordinary. One had to know that he was now in the rock-shattering heaven realm. His cultivation was 10 times the strength of the 1st level. In other words, 10% of his spirit energy was equivalent to 100% of the strength of the 1st level, soaring to the heavens. Shua! Under the urging of his spirit energy, Yi Fan quickly arrived at the entrance of the ice cave. After arriving at the entrance, the scene in front of him made Yi Fan frown and pale with fright. At this time, the 2 ice snakes were lying obediently at the entrance of the cave. Their expressions were solemn, and they did not dare to move at all. They did not even extend their forked tongues. 100 zhang away from the entrance, a person wearing a straw raincoat and a bamboo hat was holding a bamboo fishing rod. His back was facing Yi Fan as he fished. What a strong aura! Yi Fan frowned. Even the ice serpent couple who had cultivated for 1,000 years were so scared that they didn't dare to move. What kind of cultivation level did one have to be to do that? Yi Fan clenched the fleeting fire sword in his hand and used his movement skill to float off the ground. He swept towards the mysterious fisherman. Swoosh! When Yi Fan was less than 100 feet away from the fisherman lifted the fishing rod in his hand. A foot-long fish was instantly pulled out of the ice. Ha ha! He took the bait. The fisherman let out a hearty laugh. It was the voice of an old man. You are too greedy. The fisherman took the hook out of the fish's mouth and pointed at the big fish with his other hand. You almost lost your life for a little oil dough. Fortunately, you were lucky today and met this old man. If you met other people, they would either put you into a stone pot to stew or use a sword to skewer you and roast you. Remember, don't be greedy next time. Plop! As the old man spoke, he threw the fish in his hand into the ice hole in front of him. These few simple words shocked Yi Fan so much that his soul flew out of his body and scattered to the 9 heavens. His body instantly stopped. The person this old man was talking about was none other than himself. Who was this person? Why did he know so much about him? Why did he lure him out? Was it for the soul returning grass in the cave? Or did he have other motives? These questions constantly appeared in Yi Fan's mind. Ever since he started cultivating the mysterious sky secret manual, he had never felt afraid of anyone. But today he felt a trace of fear. It should be known that when he stewed the fish in the stone pot and roasted the fish with the distant fire sword, his spiritual power was very abundant. He could hear and see the slightest movement within a radius of 100 miles clearly. But even so, he still couldn't find any trace of this old man in front of him. Swoosh! The old man raised his fishing rod again, and an even bigger fish was hooked. I owe another one. This fish is really greedy. The old man quickly removed the fish from the hook again. You really aren't afraid of death. The old man pointed at the big fish and laughed. This old man has oil dough in his hand, not an inner core. There's no need to risk your life. Plop! As the old man spoke, he threw the big fish in his hand into the ice hole again. After Yi Fan heard this, his eyebrows furrowed. This old man in front of him seemed to know everything about him. As Yi Fan thought about it, he circulated his spiritual energy to his eyes and carefully examined the old man in front of him. He wanted to see how high the old man's cultivation was. But what made him feel inconceivable was that the old man in front of him didn't have the slightest bit of spiritual energy. He was no different from an ordinary person. How is this possible? When Yi Fan saw this, he was dumbfounded. One had to know that this was the land of the extreme north. Glaciers spanned thousands of miles, the cold wind was bone-piercing, and wild beasts were everywhere. Not to mention a normal old man. Even a cultivator would have to suffer quite a bit here. As Yi Fan thought about it, he lowered his body that was hovering about a foot above the ground and walked towards the old man. When he was about 10 feet away from the old man, Yi Fan stopped. Junior Yi Fan greets Senior. Yi Fan bowed to the old man. The old man hummed a song and continued to fish, ignoring Yi Fan. Junior Yi Fan greets Senior. When Yi Fan saw that the old man was ignoring him, he raised his voice. The old man still didn't pay attention to him. Seeing that the old man didn't respond, Yi Fan straightened up and walked into the ice hole. He bowed first, but the old man ignored him and pretended to be deaf. Yi Fan's temper rose. He didn't have time to watch people fish. He had to return to the ice hole to guard the 3 stalks of soul, return immortal grass. He also had to cultivate the 3rd layer of the mysterious sky secret technique. Phoenix dances 9 heavens. Time waits for no one. Chapter 3:11. After hearing this, Yi Fan's pupils constricted. He was shocked and immediately turned around. Who exactly was this old man? He knew that he was cultivating the Qi refinement chapter of the Xiantian secret manual. He also knew that he was preparing to cultivate the third level, Phoenix Dance's ninth heaven. One had to know that he had just decided on the idea of cultivating Phoenix Dance's nine heavens. Junior Yi Fan greets Senior. Yi Fan bowed deeply. May I know Senior's name? He really wanted to know the identity of this mysterious old man. I'm just a sour old man, a fake scholar, not a senior. The old man smiled without turning his head. As for my identity, you will naturally know in the future. Yi Fan saw that the old man had no intention of revealing his identity, so he didn't ask any more questions. The soul-returning grass will bloom at noon tomorrow. The old man turned his head. Have you thought about how to return? The old man had white hair and a ruddy complexion. He had a 1-foot-long white beard, a ruddy complexion, and a benevolent appearance. Yi Fan was shocked when he saw that the old man had seen through his secret. This old man was truly a godly person. Yi Fan immediately walked in front of the old man. His knees weakened and he knelt on the ground. Senior, Yi Fan lowered his head and said, in order to save my wife, Disciple traveled thousands of miles to find the soul-returning grass. Now that I have the immortal grass, I cannot return to the Great Ming Dynasty in 2 hours, so I can only take the risk and cultivate the Phoenix Dance's ninth heaven. The old man nodded while stroking his beard. Although the Xiantian secret manual is powerful, it is not the way to cultivate it. Currently, 80% of your strength is controlled by the inner core, and you have less than 20% of your spirit energy left. If you cultivate the Phoenix Dance's ninth heaven, it will be tantamount to suicide. Senior, please help Disciple out of consideration for Disciple's desire to save his wife. Yi Fan heavily knocked his head on the ice as he spoke. Since this person could see through it, he must have a way to help him recover his spirit energy. If I didn't want to help you, I wouldn't be here. The old man glanced at Yi Fan kneeling on the ground and smiled. Stand up. Thank you, Senior. Thank you, Senior. Seeing that the old man was willing to help him, Yi Fan was overjoyed. He kowtowed to the old man 3 more times, but he didn't get up. Don't thank me yet. The old man turned around with a smile on his face. First, I won't teach you a cultivation method. Second, I won't teach you spiritual power. The only thing I can give you is a poem. Sure. Yi Fan raised his head and looked at the old man with a puzzled expression. He did not understand what the old man meant. Let me ask you, do you still remember the poem I just recited? The old man asked Yi Fan. I remember, but recite it for me. The old man interrupted Yi Fan. Yes, Yi Fan replied respectfully. Birds can't fly in 1,000 hills, and people can't be found on 10,000 paths. An old man in a lone boat, fishing in the cold river and snow. This was a 5-character poem by the Tang Dynasty poet Lu Zongyuan named Jiang Shui. It was a good poem, but it had nothing to do with his spiritual energy, so it was useless. Was this old man muddle-headed? How could reciting a poem increase one's spiritual energy? Yi Fan was thinking when the fishing rod in the old man's hand hit Yi Fan's head. This old man has lived for so long, but this is the first time someone called me muddle-headed. You deserve to be hit. The old man blew his beard and glared. Disciple knows his mistake. Yi Fan instinctively reached out to block the falling fishing rod as he hurriedly said. He did not think that the old man in front of him could read his thoughts. Don't look down on this 5-character poem. There is great wisdom in it. The old man said as he took back the fishing rod. Great wisdom? Yi Fan's face was full of confusion. This poem only described an old man fishing on a glacier. How could there be great wisdom in it? Yi Fan lowered his head as he thought. I have told you about the poem. The old man said with a smile. As for whether you can comprehend the mystery within, that will depend on you. Senior, Yi Fan opened his mouth to ask, I have 2 inner cores of ice and fire in my body. Fire and water are incompatible. Just based on this poem, in his opinion, a poem would not be able to solve the conflict between the 2 inner cores in his body. Fire and water are incompatible? Ha! The old man looked up to the sky and laughed. You are the descendant of a weapon family. You don't even understand this. After hearing the old man's words, Yi Fan was even more confused. How did the inner core of ice and fire in his body have anything to do with weapons? Let me ask you. The old man looked at Yi Fan kneeling in front of him and smiled. If you want to forge a weapon, can you do without fire and water? Yi Fan frowned. The old man was right. No weapon could be forged without fire and water. Only by burning with fire and cooling with ice and water could a good weapon be forged. He began to understand something. Yin and Yang, the Tao of heaven and earth, the outline of all things, the parents of change, the origin of life and death. Extreme cold produces extreme heat. Extreme heat produces extreme cold. Within Yin, there is Yang, and within Yang, there is Yin. The old man looked at Yi Fan, who was deep in thought. He stroked his white beard and smiled. Although fire and water reinforce each other, they also complement each other. His words woke him up from his dream. The old man's words instantly enlightened Yi Fan and enlightened him. He had already figured out how to withdraw the spiritual power that was restrained by the inner core of ice and fire. Looks like you understand. The old man smiled. Thank you, Senior. Yi Fan kowtowed to the old man again. I have done what I have to do. I should go back. Study that poem when you go back. It will be useful in the future. As the old man spoke, he put away his fishing rod and prepared to leave. Senior, please wait, Yi Fan said as he stood up. The old man turned his head and looked at Yi Fan with a smile. Senior, may I ask if my deceased wife can be saved this time? Yi Fan saw that the old man was resourceful and asked him about Fujiwara no Chiko. The old man looked at Yi Fan quietly and said, neither dead nor alive. Yi Fan's heart skipped a beat. What the old man said was exactly the same as what Yun Zhongzi said. Senior, you don't have to ask more. The old man waved his hand and interrupted Yi Fan. This is a heaven's secret. It is useless to say more. Yi Fan frowned and did not ask more. Before I leave, I have something to give you. You must remember it well. The old man looked at Yi Fan and said, Senior, please. Yi Fan replied respectfully. Chapter 312. After the old man left, Yi Fan once again returned to the ice snake's cave. At this time, the pair of ice snakes had already recovered and were anxiously waiting for Yi Fan at the entrance of the cave. Seeing that Yi Fan had returned safely, the ice snake couple was overjoyed. The soul-returning immortal herb will bloom at noon tomorrow, Yi Fan said happily to the ice snake couple at the entrance of the cave. At that time, you can eat the immortal herb and safely pass the tribulation, and I can save my wife. Hiss! The ice snake couple hissed excitedly. It was obvious that they were also very happy. Before noon tomorrow, you and your wife will guard the entrance of the cave. Don't let other spiritual beings come in to snatch the immortal herb, Yi Fan said to the two ice snakes. During this time, I have to cultivate to recover my spiritual power. Otherwise, I won't be able to return in 2 hours. Hiss! The two ice snakes nodded at Yi Fan. Yi Fan smiled and used his movement technique. He floated a foot above the ground and floated into the cave. After returning to the ice pit, Yi Fan sat cross-legged and closed his eyes to concentrate. He was going to start withdrawing his spiritual power from the raging fire inner core. Before meeting the old man, he still had to rely on force to suppress the 1,000-year-old fire snake inner core. However, after the old man's words woke him up, he already had a better way to deal with the 2,000-year-old inner cores that were incompatible like water and fire. Yin and Yang, the Tao of heaven and earth, the outline of all things, and the parents of change. There was Yang and Yin and Yang. Wasn't this referring to the Tai, Chi, Yin Yang 8 trigrams diagram? Although the two Yin Yang fish in the 8 trigrams diagram reinforced and restrained each other, they were harmonious and unified. There was Yin in the Yang fish and Yang in the Yin fish. Yin and Yang were twins, and they complemented each other. This was the law of change of all things. Weren't the two ice and fire inner cores in his body the same? The ice inner core was Yin, and the raging fire inner core was Yang. as long as Yi Fan activated them like the Tai Chi Yin Yang 8 trigrams diagram. It would be fine. He did as he said. Yi Fan, who was sitting cross-legged, focused his mind and began to use his mind to divide the 80% of his spirit energy that was wrapping around the fire snake's dantian into two, withdrawing half of it. At the same time, he withdrew the cold chi from the snake shadow sword that was wrapping around the ice dantian, wrapping the other half of the spirit energy that was withdrawn from the fire snake's dantian into the ice dantian. His will and chi had arrived. Under the guidance of Yi Fan's will, the five-colored ball of light enveloping the fire snake's inner core slowly shrunk to half its original size. At the same time, it split into another five-colored ball of light and enveloped the frozen inner core that was no longer bound by the cold air. As the spiritual energy suppressing the fire snake's dantian was halved, the raging flame pill began to stir. The icy Niden also sensed its opponent's strength and began to tremble slightly. Didn't you two want to fight? All right, I'll let you two fight to your heart's content this time. As Yi Fan thought about it, he mobilized the two five-colored spiritual energy balls and slowly brought them together. The red light of the Inferno Niden exploded. The icy Niden emitted a silver light. The two Nadens began to accumulate power. Now's the time. With a thought, Yi Fan quickly used his mind to rotate the two five-colored balls of light that were hovering above each other. Swish, swish, swish. The two five-colored spiritual energy balls in Yi Fan's body began to chase each other under the guidance of Yi Fan's will, becoming faster and faster. In the process of chasing each other, Yi Fan mobilized 20% of his spiritual energy from the two balls of light. 10% of his spiritual energy formed an S-shaped barrier between the two Nadens, preventing them from colliding with each other. The other 10% of his spiritual energy formed a circular spiritual energy ball around the two Nadens, firmly trapping them inside. As for the remaining 60% of his spiritual energy, Yi Fan withdrew it all back into his Chi Si. Then he looked at the two inner cores. Because the two were separated by an S-shaped spirit chi wall, they couldn't touch each other at all. Also, because the two were like fire and water, neither would give way to the other. Therefore, they began to chase each other madly and quickly turned in circles. They didn't notice that Yi Fan had already used 10% of his spirit chi to encircle them. The Inferno Niden emitted a bright red light, blinding everyone's eyes. The icy Niden flickered a silver light, dazzling everyone's eyes. The two Nadens chased each other, not giving way to each other, blinding everyone's eyes. At this time, they reinforced and restrained each other, complementing and restraining each other. If they wanted to go crazy again, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. In the blink of an eye, a dazzling red and silver Tai Chi Yin Yang diagram was formed. Yi Fan slowly opened his eyes, revealing a rare smile on his face. Something that originally required 80% of his spiritual energy could be done now with only 20% of his spiritual energy. That old man was indeed powerful. With just a few words, he could turn something rotten into something magical. Who was this person? Why did he help him? I'm just a sour old man, a fake scholar. Yi Fan began to recall the words that the old man had said to him. Sour old man? Fake scholar? Yi Fan began to ponder with a frown. Sour old man could be understood, but what did this fake scholar mean? A scholar was a scholar. How could there be a difference between real and fake? Fake scholar, fake scholar. Yi Fan rubbed his chin and began to mutter to himself. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that there was something wrong with these three words. Could it be? Yi Fan suddenly had a flash of inspiration. Could it be? Could it be? Yi Fan began to stammer. Emperor Zhenwu. Yi Fan's eyes widened, and he blurted out, fake and real, literature and martial, man and emperor. The reverse meaning of the fake scholar was the Emperor Zhenwu. It must be him. That old man was the great Emperor Zhenwu that the young man had mentioned. Thump! Yi Fan knelt on the ground. Many thanks for your guidance, great emperor. As Yi Fan spoke, he knocked his head heavily against the ice. "What have I, Yi Fan, done to deserve your presence in the mortal world?" Chapter 3:13. With the help of great Emperor Jinwu, he would definitely be able to successfully rescue Chico this time. Yi Fan excitedly sat down cross-legged again and began to absorb spiritual energy. Currently, he had 70% spiritual energy in his body. 10% was depleted and 20% was used to suppress his inner core. What he needed to do now was to absorb spiritual energy from the outside world before noon tomorrow and replenish the spiritual energy in his chi. "Chico, we will be able to meet again tomorrow as husband and wife. Wait for me," Yi Fan thought as the corners of his mouth curled up. Noon the next day, in the Ice Serpent Cave, Yi Fan sat cross-legged as he continuously absorbed spiritual energy while staring at the 3 stalks of soul returning immortal grass in front of him. Great Emperor Zhen Wu told him that the soul returning immortal grass would bloom at noon today. At this moment, his body had already recovered 80% of its spirit energy, and his sea of energy was full. However, just in case, Yi Fan still continued to absorb spirit energy from the outside world. He gathered the excess spirit energy in his palm and stored it temporarily. Wong! At this time, in his palm, a 7-inch colored ball of light flickered and slowly rotated. He needed to gather as much spiritual energy as possible so that he could bring the soul-returning immortal grass back to Pear Blossom Palace in the shortest time possible. Wong! Just as Yi Fan was thinking, one of the stalks of soul returning immortal grass in front of him suddenly began to tremble and emit a white light. The first stalk of soul returning immortal grass was about to bloom. Yi Fan opened his eyes wide and looked at the immortal grass in front of him with excitement. Wong! The white light of the soul returning immortal grass became brighter and brighter. The palm-sized flower bud surged with white light and was about to bloom. The white light emitted from the flower bud illuminated the entire ice pit, making it seem as if they had entered a fairyland. Yi Fan stood up and held the 7-inch colored ball of light in one hand and the Everflame sword on his back with the other. He prepared to move. Wong! A dazzling ball of light slowly emitted from the roots of the soul returning immortal grass. It slowly moved along the roots and directly entered the white light surging from the flower bud. Whoosh! White light flashed, and a strange fragrance assailed the nostrils. The budding flower bud instantly bloomed. A ray of white light shot up into the sky from the flower bud and floated above the flower, sparkling without falling. The soul returning grass had bloomed. Now is the time. Yi Fan reached out and pulled out the soul returning immortal grass by its roots. Shua! After obtaining the soul returning immortal grass, Yi Fan immediately drew the cold air from the snake shadow sword from his waist and froze the 3-feet-long soul returning immortal grass into an ice pillar. He wanted to preserve the freshness of the soul return immortal grass as much as possible. There was no time to lose. He had already obtained the immortal grass, so he had to move out immediately. Buzz, buzz, the other 2 stalks of soul return grass also began to tremble. Yi Fan didn't have time to look at the 2 stalks of immortal grass anymore. He activated the spirit ball in his hand and used his peerless movement technique. He flew a foot above the ground and turned into a ray of white light, rushing toward the entrance of the cave. At this time, the 2 ice snakes were fully focused on guarding the entrance. Ever since Yi Fan told them to guard the entrance of the cave, the couple had been guarding the entrance day and night, not daring to be careless in the slightest. The soul returning immortal grass has bloomed. You 2 quickly go in and eat it. If fate wills it, we will meet again in the future. Following Yi Fan's deep voice from the depths of the ice cave, a ray of white light instantly rushed out of the ice cave and soared into the sky. When the ice snake couple heard Yi Fan's words, Yi Fan's figure was already 10,000 feet high in the sky. Hiss, hiss! The two ice snakes nodded at the ray of white light in the sky and returned to the cave. At the peak of the ice mountain, the old fisherman looked at the ray of white light flying into the sky and said, "Old Jean, your sworn brother is quite talented." He understood it so quickly. Of course, a middle-aged man wearing a monk's robe next to the old man said with a smile, "Otherwise, why would I call him my sworn brother? You really care about your sworn brother. You even gave him the Shantian secret essentials." The old man turned to the middle-aged monk and said with a smile, "Back then, when I asked you to lend me the secret essentials, you refused." "Old man, you're too unreasonable," the middle-aged monk said to the old fisherman with a smile. "You're now the Jinwu great emperor and devil-rinsing primogenitor. Your dharma power is boundless and you're omnipotent. How can my Shantian secret be worthy of your attention?" "Don't play dumb with me," the old fisherman said to the middle-aged monk. "The power of this Shantian secret manual is comparable to the Ling Shao secret manual, the heavenly spirit central pivot. In this world, from ancient times until now, other than you, there are no more than 3 people who have read this secret manual. Do you want to see it?" The middle-aged monk asked the old fisherman with a smile. "What? You're willing to lend it to me now?" The old fisherman looked at the middle-aged monk. "I can lend it to you, but—" The middle-aged monk smiled wickedly at the old fisherman. "But what?" The old fisherman smiled. "But you have to lend me the heavenly spirit core. How about that? Isn't that fair?" The middle-aged monk smiled. "I knew you would say that." The old man smiled and turned his head away. Hee. Why did you ask if you knew?" The middle-aged monk smiled. "How's your Buddhist study going?" The old man asked the middle-aged monk. "Are you used to living in that temple?" "Used to it? How can I not be used to it?" The middle-aged monk smiled. "It's better than living in that sword. How does Venerable Master Bukong treat you?" The old man asked. "Venerable Master Bukong is merciful and has a profound understanding of Buddhism." The middle-aged monk said, "To be honest, I've learned a lot. I've made the right choice in accepting him as my master. When you go back, send my regards to the old Venerable Master." The old man smiled. "Don't worry, I'll definitely pass on your words." The middle-aged monk said. Chapter 314. Don't worry about that. He won't, the middle-aged monk said with a smile. "I'll say this up front. If he really becomes a devil in the future, I can't help him," the old man said to the middle-aged monk. "I can only do things according to the rules." "I said that he won't," the middle-aged monk said solemnly as he turned his head to look at the old man. "How can you be so sure that he won't become a devil?" the old man asked. "His evil aura has already occupied half of his spiritual altar. Don't worry. Even if he really becomes a devil one day, I have a way," the middle-aged monk said with a solemn face. "What method do you have?" the old man asked. "Kill him." The middle-aged monk smiled and whispered a few words into the old man's ear. "You actually have such a thing?" the old man asked with a frown after hearing the middle-aged monk's whisper. "What do you think?" "I'm thinking about Zhou Quan, right?" the middle-aged monk said with a smile. "Aren't you afraid of inviting a wolf into the house?" the old man asked with a smile. "Hee, fighting poison with poison," the middle-aged monk said with a smile. "You're really brave," the old man said calmly. "Old Jean, I'm not afraid of anything else. I'm only afraid that one day you will fight with me for your sworn brother. If that happens, don't blame me for doing things according to the rules." "That day won't come," the middle-aged monk said calmly after taking a deep breath. "It's getting late. You should go back to your temple. I'll go take in my disciple and then return to my immortal mansion," the old man said as he patted the middle-aged monk's shoulder. "When this matter is over, I'll invite you to my place for a few drinks. By the way, remember to bring a few jars of 100 flowers drunk that your sworn brother brewed." "Okay, I'll bring my sworn brother with me," the middle-aged monk said with a deep meaning. "I hope so," the old man said as his figure disappeared in an instant. The middle-aged monk raised his head and looked into the sky. He saw a huge rainbow auspicious cloud that shone in all directions rising into the sky. "Brother Yi, don't let me down," The middle-aged monk muttered to himself as he looked at the distant horizon. Boom, 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 above the clouds. Following the rumbling of the three shock waves, a path of clouds over 100 feet wide appeared once again. Shwa! Amidst the cloud path, a white ball of light that was 30 feet in size streaked across like a shooting star. Within the silver ball of light, Yi Fan gripped the icicle with both hands and used all of his spiritual energy to activate his movement technique. Crackle. Red, purple, white, gold, and green. 5 thick bolts of lightning shuttled back and forth above the ball of light, making crackling noises. Chico, I'm here. Wait for me. Yi Fan thought to himself as he channeled his spiritual power to activate his movement technique. The heavens did not disappoint those who persevered. After going through countless difficulties and dangers, he finally found this soul-returned immortal grass in the bitterly cold lands of the extreme north. Thinking that his beloved wife would be reunited with him soon, Yi Fan revealed a childish smile. Under the stimulation of the tyrannical spiritual energy, Yi Fan finally traversed through thousands of mountains and rivers in less than 2 hours, arriving at the Pear Blossom Palace in the Miao region. Shwa! Yi Fan came to an abrupt halt in midair, following which he descended rapidly towards the waterfall. Boom! Within the waterfall, the stone door opened wide. A beautiful woman hugged Baihu as she looked into the sky with a face full of surprise. It was Jinshan and Xiao Zhao. They were waiting for him. Shwa! A ray of white light rushed into the waterfall from the sky and stopped in front of Jinshan. What a fast movement technique! Jinshan looked at Yi Fan in disbelief. Now, Yi Fan's movement technique was so fast that even she could barely keep up with him with her eyes. Looking at Yi Fan in front of her, Baihu's gaze softened. Granny, Xiao Zhao, Yi Fan hurriedly said, I found the soul return immortal grass. As he spoke, he passed the icicle in his hand to Jinshan. Time was of the essence, so he did not have time to bow to Jinshan. Quick, go and unseal Chico's ice coffin. Quickly. Jinshan immediately said to Yi Fan after receiving the soul return immortal grass. Yi Fan nodded and once again used his movement technique to rush into the cave. Shwa! In the blink of an eye, a shadow appeared in front of Fujiwara no Chico's ice coffin. Chico will be reunited as husband and wife soon. As Yi Fan spoke, he pressed both his palms against the ice coffin. He channeled the overbearing spiritual energy within his body and directly absorbed the cold air from Fujiwara no Chico's ice coffin into the snake's shadow sword at his waist. Whoosh! Cold air rose from all directions. The huge ice coffin slowly shrank and gradually disappeared. Fujiwara no Chico lay there quietly, as if she had fallen asleep. Granny, Yi Fan turned to Jinshan behind him and said, What should we do now? Go and bring the evil cauldron over. As Jinshan spoke, a golden light shone from her hands. The ice pillar that sealed the soul return immortal grass slowly disappeared, and the white light of the soul return immortal grass appeared again. Shwa! Yi Fan's figure instantly appeared in front of the evil cauldron in the corner of the room. Shwa! He and the evil cauldron instantly appeared next to Fujiwara no Chico. Time was of the essence, and he could not afford to waste any time. Even if it was only a dozen steps away, he had to use his movement technique. Granny, cauldron. Yi Fan put down the evil cauldron in his hands. Jinshan replied and sat next to Fujiwara no Chico. Who? Jinshan opened her red lips slightly and gently blew at the soul return immortal grass in her hands. Buzz! Under Jinshan's gentle blow, the soul return immortal grass glowed with white light. Then a white light as thick as a thumb flowed out of the petals and slowly flew into Fujiwara no Chico's 7 orifices. Chapter 315. Whoosh! The immortal herb in Jinshan's hand began to disappear, turning into a white light and entering Fujiwara no Chico's body. Buzz! Buzz, buzz. The white light on Fujiwara no Chico's body became brighter and brighter, flashing more and more frequently. Buzz. At the same time, the Soul Congregation Evil Cauldron on the side began to emit white light and tremble slightly. It's a white light. Yifan was shocked. That was the white light he saw in Ito Fumio's wooden house. Could it be that this white light was Chico's soul? Buzz, buzz, buzz. The white light on Fujiwara no Chico's body flashed faster and faster, more and more rapidly. Bang, bang, bang. The lid on the evil cauldron began to vibrate violently, as if something was about to rush out from inside. Soul into body. Jin-chan shouted softly. Her hands flipped, and then she pointed at the evil cauldron with one hand. Swoosh! A dazzling golden light shot out from Jin-chan's finger and shot straight at the Soul Congregation Evil Cauldron. Buzz! The Soul Congregation Evil Cauldron began to emit golden light. Soul return. Jin-chan opened her palm, and the golden light pillar that was as thick as a thumb suddenly expanded several times, becoming as thick as a bowl. Bang! A golden circular shockwave was emitted from Jin-chan's palm, forming a golden halo. In the halo, a large golden rune was flowing with golden light, shining brightly. At this time, Jin-chan's body was covered in golden light. Her hair was dancing, and her long dress was swaying without any wind. Coupled with her beautiful and delicate face, she was like a fairy descending to the mortal world. Swoosh! The golden rune flew out from Jin-chan's hand and slowly imprinted itself on the Soul Congregation Evil Cauldron. Buzz! After the Soul Congregation Evil Cauldron made contact with the golden rune, it began to emit golden light. Chico, Jin-chan, with her long hair dancing in the wind, shouted as she activated the golden light in her palm. If not now, then when? Bang! As soon as Golden Silkworm finished speaking, a white light instantly squeezed a gap in the lid of the evil cauldron. It wriggled out of the evil cauldron and slowly flew into Fujiwara Kienko's body. It was Chico. Yifan's eyes widened. Chico had come out. Croak! When the white light was less than a foot away from Fujiwara no Chico, the blood-eye toad on top of the Soul Congregation Evil Cauldron suddenly let out a croak. Hiss! 2 blood-red lightning bolts shot out of the blood-eyed toad's eyes, instantly stopping the white light that was about to enter its body. Sizzle! The power of the white light was obviously not as strong as the red electric light. Under the pull of the red electric light, the white light began to slowly retreat. Not good. When Golden Silkworm saw that Fujiwara Chiyoko's soul was blocked, she was shocked. She didn't have time to think. She immediately used her other hand to gather spiritual power and pointed at the 2 red electric lights. Sizzle! In the blink of an eye, a golden electric light shot out from Jin-chan's finger and joined the fight against the red electric light. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. With the addition of Jin-chan's golden electric light, the red electric light began to slow down. Even so, the white light was still slowly being pulled back by the red electric light. Jin-chan's forehead began to sweat profusely. She had to suppress the evil cauldron and fight against the blood-eye toad's electric light. She couldn't concentrate at all. When Yifan saw this, he was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. He had spiritual energy, but he couldn't help it all. Baihu Xiao also began to feel uneasy and kept pacing back and forth. Seeing that Fujiwara no Chico's soul was about to be pulled back into the cauldron by the red electric light, Jin-chan gritted her teeth and made up her mind. She suddenly changed the direction of the golden light pillar that was suppressing the evil cauldron and shot it at the 2 red electric lights. She had to concentrate her power. Otherwise, all her previous efforts would be wasted. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. With the addition of the golden light pillar, the red electric light was stopped again. Croak! At this time, the blood-eye toad let out a second croak. Swoosh! With the second croak, the 2 red electric lights suddenly doubled in size. At this time, the evil cauldron was already free from Jin-chan's suppression, so its power was naturally recovering quickly. The two powers, one gold and one red, began a tug-of-war for the white light. On one side, the gold light shone dazzlingly, while on the other side, the red light exploded, dazzling everyone's eyes. Sizzle. The white light in the middle began to twist and change shape. Bang! Under the tug of the two powers, the white light instantly broke apart. Half of the white light was pushed back into Fujiwara no Chiko's body by Jin-chan's golden light, while the other half was quickly pulled back into the evil cauldron by the red electric light. Everything returned to normal once again. Jin-chan was stunned on the spot, sweating profusely. Yifan was dumbfounded. He did not know what to do. Baihu leaped to Fujiwara no Chiko's side and stuck out her pink tongue to lick Fujiwara no Chiko's face. Buzz! As the white light on Fujiwara no Chiko's body faded, her pale face began to regain its color. Fujiwara no Chiko, who was lying on the wooden bed, let out a moan. Chiko! Hearing his beloved wife's voice, Yifan rushed to Fujiwara no Chiko's side. Chiko had come back to life. Yifan's tears began to well up at his eyes. Chiko, wake up! Yifan excitedly grabbed Fujiwara no Chiko's hand and placed it on his cheek. Yifan, wake up! But to Yifan's disappointment, Fujiwara no Chiko did not move after that. No matter how he shouted, his beloved wife did not wake up. Chapter 316. Actually, even without Jin-chan's answer, Yifan understood most of what had happened. Only half of the white light had entered Fujiwara no Chiko's body. The other half had been sucked back into the evil soul gathering cauldron. In other words, his beloved wife's soul was not complete. Even so, he still had to ask Jin-chan. He did not understand why his beloved wife had woken up earlier, but why was there no reaction now? Jin-chan slowly walked to Fujiwara no Chiko's side. She reached out and spread out Fujiwara no Chiko's arm to feel her pulse. After a long time, Jin-chan released her hand and frowned. "How is it, Granny?" Yifan asked Jin-chan anxiously. "Her soul is incomplete now," Jin-chan said to Yifan with a guilty expression. "Of the 3 souls and 7 spirits, only 5 have been taken back. The remaining 3 souls and 2 spirits are still in the evil cauldron." Yifan's eyes stared blankly, and he stood there without a word. "This is all Granny's fault. Granny's skills are not good enough," Jin-chan said to Yifan. "Granny, this isn't your fault." Yifan slowly shook his head. "If it wasn't for you, Granny, Chinzi wouldn't even be able to return a single soul." Jin-chan was silent. She had thought that with the soul returning grass and her own cultivation, she would be able to retrieve Fujiwara no Chiko's soul. She did not expect the evil cauldron to be so powerful that she could only take back 5 of the spirits. While Yifan was on his way to the northernmost north, Golden Silkworm had carefully studied the evil soul gathering cauldron. In fact, with her current cultivation base, it was not difficult to open the evil cauldron by force. However, the evil cauldron was not only powerful, it also had intelligence and a violent temper. If she really did that, she was afraid that the evil cauldron would not hand over Fujiwara Chiko's soul, even if it was smashed into pieces. At that time, not only would she not be able to save her, her soul would also be destroyed. "Granny, I want to take the evil cauldron to Matsumoto Takeyoshi," Yifan said to Jin-chan. "I entrust Chiko to your care." As Yifan spoke, his knees buckled and he knelt in front of Jin-chan. "What were you doing?" Jin-chan did not understand why Yifan would suddenly kneel in front of her. "Get up," Jin-chan said as she started to help Yifan up. "Granny." Yifan broke free from Jin-chan's hands and kowtowed heavily to the ground. "Ever since Chiko and I met, we have repeatedly troubled you to help us. Yifan is eternally grateful." "Thank you." "Child, why are you saying this? Get up." Jin-chan went to help Yifan up again. "Granny, listen to me." Yifan straightened up from his kneeling position, his eyes red. "This time, I'm going to look for Matsumoto Takeyoshi. It's very likely that I won't be able to return. If I don't make it back in 3 days, it means that something has happened to me." But don't worry, even if I have to sacrifice my cultivation, I will save Chico's soul. When the time comes, please help me summon Chico's soul and save her life. In the underworld, Fan Air will be able to rest easy. Yifan said as he kowtowed again. Yifan's words made Jin Chan's nose sour and her eyes red. Yifan was telling her what to do after his death. Child, what nonsense are you spouting? Jin Chan reached out to pull Yifan back. Granny, let me finish. Yifan stubbornly refused to get up. If something happens to me, you must find a way to find 1,000 Demons Hall's Hall Master, Nye Qing. He was my best friend in my past life. The 100 herbs pill in his hand can restore Xiao Zhao's human body. For the sake of our friendship in our past life, he definitely won't sit idly by. Xiao Zhao is my adopted sister. I entrust her future to you, Granny. Yifan kowtowed to Jin Chan for the 3rd time as he spoke. Don't say any more. Jin Chan's voice began to choke with sobs. Woo! After hearing Yifan's words, Baihu jumped from the wooden bed in front of Yifan. As it sobbed, it frantically pulled at Yifan's blood-stained robes with its mouth, refusing to let go. Xiao Zhao, listen to me. Yifan's eyes reddened as he reached out to stroke Baihu. Woo! When the teary-eyed Baihu saw Yifan reach out to stroke it, it instantly let go of Yifan's robes. Then, it opened its mouth and viciously bit down on Yifan's hand. Woo-woo! Baihu whimpered as it frantically swung Yifan's hand back and forth. It couldn't let Yifan risk his life and die for nothing. This scene made Yifan unable to hold back his tears. Baihu looked like it was viciously biting him, but in fact, it didn't use any strength at all. It was only gently holding Yifan's finger in its mouth. Even at this time, it was still afraid of hurting him. As Yifan thought in his heart, 2 clear lines of tears flowed down from the corners of his eyes. I won't stop you from going, Jin Chan choked with sobs and said, but you have to bring Xiao Zhao with you. The scene in front of her reminded her master Tian Kenzi's words. This man and Fox had a deep relationship and were each other's saviors. She wanted Yifan to bring Xiao Zhao with him because, firstly, Yifan would have something to worry about so that he wouldn't die so easily. Secondly, she hoped that Yifan could help Xiao Zhao get through this calamity and recover her human body. Looking at Jin Chan, whose eyes were red and her voice choked with sobs, and then looking at Xiao Zhao, who had already turned into a fox and couldn't bear to part with her life, Yifan, whose face was full of tears, slowly nodded at Jin Chan. Seeing Yifan nod his head, the white fox let out a sigh of relief. Granny, take care of yourself. I'll leave everything to you, Yifan said as he stood up. I'll take care of Chico. Don't worry, Jin Chan said. As for Xiao Zhao, I'll leave it to you. Jin Chan's words had a deeper meaning. Yifan nodded and then said to Baihu, Xiao Zhao, let's go. Baihu jumped onto Yifan's shoulder. Pa! Yifan lifted the Soul Congregation Evil Cauldron with one hand. Granny, we're leaving. Yifan said goodbye to Jin Chan. Be careful and come back soon. Jin Chan choked with sobs. Chapter 317. On the warship at the East China Sea. In the cabin, Matsumoto Takeyoshi sat on the tatami with the green and white envoys standing behind him. In front of Matsumoto Takeyoshi, a masked ninja in white with a sword on his back knelt on one knee and reported to Matsumoto Takeyoshi. After hearing the ninja's report, Matsumoto Takeyoshi's eyes lit up and he straightened his body. He will arrive in 7 days? Yes. The ninja in white nodded. Good, good. Matsumoto Takeyoshi stood up excitedly and waved his sleeve at the ninja in white. The white-clothed masked ninja nodded slightly and disappeared in a flash. I didn't expect Sasaki and Miyamoto Akichi to find him so quickly, the green-clothed man behind him said. With this person's help, even if I don't have the Yi family's weapon forging manual, I can rest easy. Matsumoto Takeyoshi smiled and walked to the chess table. On the chessboard, there was a chess game. Ever since the stone chess set was destroyed by Shinozaki with the white jade mask, Matsumoto Takeyoshi had ordered someone to make a new set. Matsumoto Takeyoshi picked up a white chess piece from the jar and placed it heavily on the chessboard. The person they were talking about was none other than Kazuken Sato, who was known as a genius swordsmith in Japan. Matsumoto Takeyoshi was very meticulous in his work. When he sent Hattori Chiksuyo and Fujiwara no Chiko to the Yi family to steal the weapon forging manual, he also sent Sasaki and Miyamoto Akichi to investigate Kazuken Sato's whereabouts. According to reliable sources, Kazuken Sato had retired after he finished forging his third famous sword Skybreaker at the age of 60 and traveled the world. Matsumoto Takeyoshi spent a lot of effort to find out that this person had gone to the Great Ming Dynasty. After hearing this news, Matsumoto Takeyoshi was overjoyed. The reason was simple. His influence in the Great Ming Dynasty was far greater than in Japan. It was not difficult to find this person. When Fujiwara no Chiko and Hattori Chiksuyo failed to steal the weapon forging manual, he placed all his hopes on finding Kazuken Sato. Now that he knew that the two of them would bring this person back in 7 days, how could Matsumoto Takeyoshi not be happy? After all, this person alone was more than 1,000 soldiers. The reason why he was willing to pay any price to find Kazuken Sato was simple. He wanted to equip his 300 Black Feather Troop with godly weapons. This unit was Matsumoto Takeyoshi's beloved unit. It was a force that he treasured greatly. He would not use it easily. Every Black Feather Ninja in the cabin was a top-notch expert that he had carefully selected. Although they were not as powerful as the 13 experts in the cabin, they were definitely not ordinary experts. Needless to say, the silent white-clothed expert behind him and Ito Fumio, who lived in seclusion on Mount Fuji, these two experts were originally from the Black Feathers ninja clan and were known as the Black Feathers Duo. The combat strength of the Black Feather ninjas was imaginable. However, to do a good job, one must first sharpen the tools. Although the Black Feather ninjas were strong, the weapons in their hands were no different from ordinary ninja weapons. Such a strong troop without decent weapons made Matsumoto Takeyoshi feel that it was a pity. Although he sent people everywhere to hire famous blacksmiths, the weapons made by these so-called famous blacksmiths did not meet his expectations. Therefore, when he learned that the weapons made by the Yi family of the Great Ming Dynasty were famous all over the world, and that the genius blacksmith Kazuken Sato's weapons were superb, he immediately arranged masters to do these two things. God rewards those who work hard. Under the search of Sasaki and Miyamoto Akichi, they finally found Kazuken Sato in an inconspicuous blacksmith shop on the border of the Great Ming Dynasty. As long as he could get the help of this person, the combat strength of his Black Feather Troop would soar, and they would be unstoppable. Thinking of this, Matsumoto Takeyoshi's face showed a rare smile. Boom! Just when Matsumoto Takeyoshi was in a good mood, a loud roar came into his ears, and the warship under his feet began to shake violently. Brush! Just when Matsumoto Takeyoshi was about to fall, the man in green behind him moved and instantly supported Matsumoto Takeyoshi. He's here? This time Matsumoto Takeyoshi did not panic, but showed a meaningful smile. Let's go out and have a look. Matsumoto Takeyoshi tidied up his clothes and walked out of the cabin with his hand behind his back, followed by the two green and white messengers. On the deck, 13 masters were already standing there, with different expressions, looking up at the uninvited guest in the air. Why is it him again? Bama Chanqing in a white robe looked at Yi Fan in the air and frowned. He can't open the evil cauldron, so of course he's here to find Mr. Matsumoto. Yokoyama Yugo in a loose kimono said. It's not that he can't open it, it's that he can't open it. Onijiro in a black robe said calmly. If he forcibly opens the cauldron, his wife's soul will disappear. Akatsuki in a blood-red robe with a veil over her face frowned when she heard Onijiro's words. Mr. Onijiro is indeed wise, hitting the nail on the head, the old Kameya said with a smile, holding a wooden staff in his hand. Mr. Muin, you're too kind. Onijiro looked at Kamehameha and said calmly. This evil cauldron has been opened before. Fujita Takashi, in a loose gray kimono who had been silent all this time, said. What? It's been open before? Bamboo Chanshin frowned and asked. That's right, Fujita Takashi said. There's an incomplete soul of a woman in the cauldron. If I'm not wrong, that should be the soul of his wife, Fujiwara no Chiko. Akatsuki frowned again. It looks like we're going to have a fierce battle today, the short green-eyed boy said. The masters didn't say anything else. High up in the sky, the silver-haired Yi Fan held the soul congregation evil cauldron with his back to the fire god weapon. His expression was cold, and his gaze was like a knife as he looked down murderously. Baihu Xiao Zhao lay meekly on his left shoulder and looked down coldly at the people below. Whoosh! The sea breeze blew, and Yi Fan's long robe that was stained with the blood of the ice snake fluttered in the wind. Chapter 3:18. Yi Fan-kun, I didn't expect us to meet again so soon. Matsumoto Takeyoshi lifted his head to look at the cold Yi Fan in the sky and said with a smile. In the sky. Yi Fan did not reply. He narrowed his eyes and threw the evil cauldron down. Whoosh! The evil cauldron, which weighed a few hundred pounds, flew like a meteor towards Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Matsumoto Takeyoshi, who was on the deck, smiled. He did not seem to care about the soul congregation evil cauldron that was flying towards him. Whoosh! Before the evil cauldron arrived, the strong wind had arrived first. The air current created by the evil cauldron blew Matsumoto Takeyoshi's long robe and hair. The evil cauldron arrived in an instant. Whoosh! When the evil cauldron was less than half a foot away from Matsumoto Takeyoshi, a green shadow appeared in front of Matsumoto Takeyoshi. It was the man in green. Huh! In the blink of an eye, the man in blue stretched out his hand and caught the flying evil cauldron. Boom! He placed the evil cauldron on the deck. Then, in a flash, he returned behind Matsumoto Takeyoshi. His mission was to protect Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Without Matsumoto Takeyoshi's permission, he would not attack anyone. This cauldron was originally in Dongying. I didn't expect you to specially bring it here. Yi Fan-kun, I'll have to trouble you. Matsumoto Takeyoshi said as he reached out to touch the blood-eye toad. Buzz! The moment the blood-eye toad touched Matsumoto Takeyoshi's hand, its eyes emitted a gentle green light. Yi Fan, who was floating in the air, frowned slightly. Only Matsumoto Takeyoshi could open this evil cauldron. Open it, Yi Fan said. Give me Chico's soul. I'm afraid I can't agree to Yi Fan-kun's request. Matsumoto Takeyoshi smiled as he stroked the blood-eyed toad on the evil cauldron. He didn't even raise his head. It was Inchan Dashyong who took your wife's soul. It was also him who sealed her soul into the cauldron. It has nothing to do with me. The cauldron is mine. Whether I open it or not is my business. It has nothing to do with you. Yi Fan, who was hovering in the air, narrowed his eyes. A strong, killing intent instantly spread out in all directions. What a strong, killing intent. On the deck, Bama Chanshin had a solemn expression. Looks like we have something to do today, Hung Shan Yugo said with a frown. With the green and white emissaries here, we don't even have to do anything, Chin Kong Iha said with a smile. We just have to watch the show today. Mr. Iha is right, Onajiro said with a smile. I heard that the green and white emissaries are extremely powerful and unfathomable. As the saying goes, seeing is believing. Today is a good opportunity to broaden my horizons, Onajiro said as he turned to look at the green and white emissaries standing behind Matsumoto Takeyoshi. The white emissary said nothing. Her gaze was calm as if she hadn't heard anything. The green emissary, however, turned to look coldly at Onajiro. Mister, you go and meet him, Matsumoto Takeyoshi said to the green emissary. Matsumoto Takeyoshi understood the meaning behind the words of Chinkong, Iha, and Onajiro. It was obvious that some of the 13 people doubted the abilities of the green and white emissaries. Onajiro and Chinkong Iha were only voicing the thoughts of the majority. In fact, it wasn't strange for them to have such thoughts. The green and white emissaries had always been low-key and rarely moved about in Jianghu. In addition, the two of them always wore veils. Naturally, the rumors in Jianghu wouldn't convince these experts. Although Matsumoto Takeyoshi treated them like honored guests, they understood that the only people who could truly gain the complete trust of Matsumoto Takeyoshi were the green and white emissaries. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought them with him day and night. Although the experts didn't say anything, their hearts were as clear as a mirror. Yifan's appearance gave them an opportunity. They wanted to see how powerful the green and white emissaries were to be able to make the suspicious Matsumoto Takeyoshi trust them so much. However, they wanted to see the green and white emissaries make a fool of themselves. Only then could they prove their strength. In order to convince the crowd and to test the level of Yifan, Matsumoto Takeyoshi ordered the green emissary to fight. Hearing Matsumoto Takeyoshi's order, the green emissary nodded slightly. Then, with a move, he disappeared from the spot. Shwa! In the blink of an eye, the green emissary appeared in the air 100 feet away from Yifan. He was floating in the air. What a nimble movement technique! The experts were secretly shocked. Onajiro smiled and nodded repeatedly. Chinkong Iha crossed his arms and looked at the sky with interest. I'm looking for Matsumoto Takeyoshi. It has nothing to do with you. The murderous Yifan said coldly as he looked at the green emissary. Yifan, Kuan, you're wrong, the green emissary said. Protecting Mr. Matsumoto is my duty. How can you say that it has nothing to do with me? Whoever stands in my way, I want them dead, Yifan said calmly. Whoever wants to hurt Mr. Matsumoto, I want their life, the green emissary said calmly. The corners of Yifan's mouth curled up into an evil smile. The green emissary frowned slightly. Yifan's sinister smile was like a ghost, making people feel uncomfortable. Shwa! Just as the green-robed man was frowning, Yifan's figure disappeared in an instant. Shwa! The green emissary also disappeared into thin air. The two of them were going to fight. The experts on the deck widened their eyes. Shwa! The two of them disappeared almost at the same time and reappeared 100 feet away from the battleship. Green shadow art. The green emissary's palm glowed with a green light and went straight for Yifan. Yifan was expressionless as he met the attack with his palm. Bang! An earth-shattering sound was heard as the two of them struck out with their palms. Boom! A huge translucent shockwave appeared between their palms and spread out at high speed. Whoosh! The shockwave produced a huge force that caused the sea beneath their feet to sink 90 feet. Whoosh! The originally calm sea was instantly suppressed by the shockwave and formed a huge wave that was 100 feet tall. With the two of them as the center, the huge wave crashed in all directions. Chapter 319. Seeing that the huge wave was about to engulf the battleship, Funakoshi Shinichi, who had been silent on the deck, frowned. He raised his head and instantly struck out with his palm towards the huge wave that was about to hit him from afar. Bang! The towering wave that was several hundred feet tall seemed to have collided with an invisible wall and instantly lost its power. Whoosh! The surging waves fell back into the sea. What a strong inner energy. All the experts were secretly shocked. Fune really lived up to his name. Looking at the sea again, Yifan, who was wearing a blood-red robe, and the green-clothed man's palms were still facing each other. Wong! The green-clothed man's body emitted a green light, and his green robe fluttered in the wind. In the center of his palm, a green light ball had already appeared. The green light was dazzling as it circulated. Yifan had an evil smile on his face as he stared at the green-clothed man. Unlike the green-clothed man, Yifan's body did not emit any light at all. This made the green-clothed man feel that something was wrong. Previously, when he fought with Yifan at the Zhou residence, both of them were holding back and did not use their full strength. It could be said that they were evenly matched, and there was no clear winner. He clearly remembered that when he fought with Yi Fan that day, both of them had a spiritual energy ball in their palms. At that time, he used less than 30% of his spiritual energy, and the spiritual energy ball in his hand was only 3 inches in size. Now, he had used 50% of his spiritual energy, and the spiritual energy ball in his palm was 7 inches in size. At this time, Yi Fan's palm was empty. This could only mean one thing. Yi Fan's current spirit chi cultivation had far surpassed what it used to be. This brat was able to receive 50% of his spiritual energy without using any spiritual energy. The green-clothed man frowned. "I'm not interested in your life." Yi Fan, who was floating above the sea, said coldly to the green-clothed man, "Don't force me to kill you." As Yi Fan spoke, he suddenly activated 20% of his spiritual energy. Wong. A 1-foot-long 5-colored spiritual energy ball instantly appeared in his palm. What an overbearing spiritual energy! The green-clothed man was shocked. In a moment of desperation, he hastily increased the amount of spiritual energy in his hand to 80%. Under the stimulation of the man in blue's spiritual power, the green light ball in his palm instantly doubled in size. "If you want to touch Mr. Matsumoto, you'll have to get past me first," the man in green said loudly. "You're overestimating yourself." Yi Fan narrowed his eyes as he suddenly exerted force with his palm. Buzz! The 5-colored spiritual energy ball in Yi Fan's hand suddenly expanded and shone brightly. Boom! A 1-foot-thick 5-colored light beam suddenly shot out from the 5-colored light ball. Bang! Azure light scattered in all directions, and fragments of light splattered everywhere. The azure-clothed man's azure light ball was instantly dispersed by Yi Fan's 5-colored spirit energy pillar. Specks of light fell from the sky. Boom! After the 5-colored light beam shattered the green light ball, its power did not diminish, and it continued to rush towards the green-clothed man's chest. The blue-clothed man's pupils instantly constricted. He didn't expect that 80% of his spiritual energy would be so weak. His thinking was too simple. The current Yi Fan and the Yi Fan at the Zhou residence could not be mentioned in the same breath. Although Yi Fan only used 20% of his spiritual energy, it must be known that 20% of his spiritual energy was equivalent to 2 times the spiritual energy of the skyrocketing realm. Whoosh! The 5-colored light illuminated his constricted pupils and Yi Fan's cold face. Boom! The 1-foot-thick 5-colored light beam solidly rushed towards the center of the man's chest. Whoosh! The man in green was instantly sent flying by the 5-colored light beam. What was even more inconceivable was that the 5-colored light beam did not slow down after it sent the man in green flying. It continued to rush towards the warship dozens of feet away. Whoosh! The 5-colored light beam was so fast that the blue sea was instantly split open, and a 5-foot-wide waterway appeared. This move caused the expressions of the experts on the deck to change greatly. They were deeply shocked by Yi Fan's spiritual energy cultivation. What did this young man experience to be able to reach such a level of cultivation? Whoosh! The 5-colored light beam from the blue-clothed man was extremely fast and arrived in the blink of an eye. Whoosh! In this instant, the white-clothed man behind Matsumoto Takeyoshi moved and disappeared. Whoosh! The blue-clothed man at the top of the 5-colored light beam instantly disappeared. Boom! A loud sound was heard, and wood splinters flew everywhere. The huge warship was directly penetrated by Yi Fan's 5-colored light beam, and a 3-foot-wide hole appeared. If Yi Fan's light beam had moved another 3 feet to the left, the one with the hole would have been Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Yi Fan purposely missed this move. He could not kill Matsumoto Takeyoshi now. The reason was simple. If Matsumoto Takeyoshi died, no one would be able to open the evil cauldron. What he wanted to do was to make a show of force. He wanted Matsumoto Takeyoshi to open the evil cauldron obediently and return the soul of his beloved wife to him. Whoosh! A shadow flashed, and the white-clothed man appeared next to Matsumoto Takeyoshi, carrying the blue-clothed man on his shoulder. Take him down to heal his wounds. The white-clothed man placed the blue-clothed man on the deck and said to the ninjas not far away, "Hi, hi." The several ninjas who were scared silly came back to their senses, trotted over, and hurriedly carried the unconscious azure-clothed man away. "How are his wounds?" Matsumoto Takeyoshi frowned and asked the white-clothed man beside him. "He will not be able to use spiritual power for half a year." The white-clothed man, with a veil, said calmly. After Matsumoto Takeyoshi heard this, his brows furrowed. He raised his head and looked at the expressionless Yi Fan floating above the sea. He narrowed his eyes. "Do you want me to help?" The white-clothed man asked Matsumoto Takeyoshi calmly. "No need," Matsumoto Takeyoshi replied. The white-clothed man did not say anything else and retreated behind Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Dozens of feet away, Yi Fan, who was floating above the sea, frowned. He did not expect the white-clothed man behind Matsumoto Takeyoshi to be able to save the blue-clothed man so easily. This made him feel a little surprised. The white-clothed man's cultivation was just as Ito Fumio had said. His cultivation was high and unfathomable. The blue-clothed man's cultivation was not even worth mentioning in front of him. Yi Fan's expression became serious. Originally, he wanted to make a show of force and force Matsumoto Takeyoshi to open the cauldron. Now, it seemed that it would not be so easy. Now, the white-clothed man was not the only expert beside Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Chapter 320. As Yi Fan thought about it, he started to observe the 13 Japanese on the deck. Just as he expected, the light emitted from the meridians of these 13 people was a mixture of different colors and shapes. They were all experts. What surprised him was that the man in blue who had injured him that day was among them. Enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road. Yi Fan immediately clenched his fists tightly when he recalled the time when he had been beaten up by the man in blue until he could not even fight back. His knuckles cracked. Yi Fan suppressed the murderous intent in his heart and tried to calm himself down. The man in blue deserved to be killed, but he was not here to kill, but to save someone. He had to force Matsumoto Takeyoshi to open the evil cauldron and hand over the soul of his beloved wife. At the thought of this, he moved and used a peerless movement technique. With a whoosh, he disappeared on the spot. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, Yi Fan appeared on top of the warship. He stretched out one hand and bent his fingers into a claw. He then grabbed at Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Capture the leader first. Yi Fan did not have time to deal with the others. He immediately attacked Matsumoto Takeyoshi. As long as he caught Matsumoto Takeyoshi, he was not afraid that he would refuse to open the evil cauldron. Swoosh! Just as Yi Fan attacked Matsumoto Takeyoshi, a dazzling white light arc that was more than 3 meters long shot up from the deck and went straight for Yi Fan. What a powerful sword chi! Yi Fan exclaimed in his heart. On the deck, Bamu Changqing, who was wearing a white ninja outfit and holding a battle sword, looked coldly at Yi Fan, who was in the air. He was the famous sect leader of the Koguryu, one of the 3 major ninjutsu sects in Japan. His ninjutsu was famous in the Jianghu, and his sword chi was superb. Seeing that Yi Fan was about to use the move that imprisoned Enchantation, he did not have time to think. He immediately pulled out his sword and used his sword chi to stop Yi Fan from using his sword chi. Shwa! When he saw the saber aura coming at him, Yi Fan used his movement technique and instantly moved 3 feet to the left, dodging the white arc of light. Shwa! Just as Yi Fan came to a stop in midair, a blue arc of light rushed up from the deck. The arc of light was 30 feet long, almost forming a semicircle. The blue light was dazzling and dazzling. It was the blue-robed man. This bastard will never change its habit of sneak attacks. Yi Fan cursed in his heart. The blue-clothed man on the deck gripped his saber and gritted his teeth as he stared at Yi Fan, who was high up in the sky. The scene of him being completely defeated in the cave was something he would never forget for the rest of his life. That was his humiliation. Ever since he left the cave that day, He had been training hard day and night, all for the sake of being able to kill Yi Fan, who had caused him to suffer a crushing defeat. Shua! 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 After the blue arc of light rushed up, 3 more arcs of light instantly flew up from the deck and headed straight for Yi Fan. The first of the 5 children of Japan, Green-Eyed Child, the fourth, Kato Nagano, and the famous kendo expert Yokoyama Yugo, all 3 of them attacked at the same time. The 4 arcs of light were extremely fast, like a net of light, rushing towards Yi Fan, who was high up in the sky. Although the 4 of them attacked at the same time, their goal was completely different from Bama Chanching's. Bama Chanching only wanted to protect Matsumoto Takeyoshi, but the 4 of them had different goals in mind. The blue-robed man, Sato Kawaki, attacked Yi Fan to take revenge for the humiliation he suffered last time. He could not wait to kill Yi Fan. Green-Eyed Child attacked because he wanted to show off his cultivation in front of everyone. He was the shortest among them, and his strong self-esteem made him eager to gain merit. So he wanted to take the lead. Yokoyama Yugo had always wanted to spar with the top experts of Great Ming Dynasty. Now that he saw Yi Fan's profound cultivation, he was itching to test his skills. As for the fourth of the 5 children, Kato Nagano, his goal was even simpler. He had a crush on Mochizuki Kumi, who was ranked 3rd for a long time, and wanted to use this opportunity to show his face in front of her and make her smile. The 4 of them attacked at the same time, and Yi Fan was instantly enraged. The man was harmless to the tiger, but the tiger wanted to hurt the man. He did not want to find trouble with these people, but they kept pushing him, making him their enemy at every step. These people deserved to be killed. These people deserved to die. Yi Fan's anger rose from his heart, and his murderous intent appeared. Burning with anger, he faced the 4 arcs of light in the blink of an eye and did not dodge. Instead, he rushed towards the arcs of light. At the same time, Yi Fan stretched out one hand and pulled out the Everflame sword from his back. Clang! The Everflame sword was unsheathed, and a red light burst out, and the flames rose. Yi Fan mobilized his spiritual power to activate the Everflame sword in his hand, and suddenly slashed downwards. Rushing downwards, unsheathing the sword, and slashing downwards. These 3 movements were as smooth as flowing water and were done in one breath. Hiss! A red pillar of flame, which was more than 10 feet long and as thick as a bowl, gushed out from the tip of the Everflame sword, and like a red whip, it lashed towards the 4 arcs of light that were rushing towards him. The speed of the flame pillar was as fast as lightning. Boom, 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 boom. Blue light danced, and white light splashed everywhere. After the 4 arcs of light came into contact with the flame pillar, they were instantly cut in half and scattered in all directions. However, the long whip-like red flame pillar did not slow down at all. After breaking through the arcs of light, it continued to slash downwards, ruthlessly lashing towards the people on the warship. Whoosh! The light of the flame pillar illuminated everyone's shocked faces. Water curtain! In a flash, Haruko Sakuragi, who was ranked 2nd among the 5, suddenly waved her sleeves at the flame pillar that was descending from the sky. Boom! A huge water pillar, which was more than 10 feet thick, shot up from the blue sea, like a blue dragon breaking out of the sea, and rushed towards the long whip-like flame pillar. Whoosh! The flame pillar danced like a fire dragon, and the flames burned fiercely. Boom! The towering water pillar was like a water dragon emerging from the sea, and the blue sea shone brightly. Chapter 3:21. Chi. The cold seawater and the blazing flames instantly collided, stirring up water vapor in the air like a thick fog. What a powerful imperial water technique! The black-robed Onijiro was shocked. The imperial water technique was indeed worthy of its reputation. However, just when everyone thought that Yi Fan's flaming pillar of light had been blocked by the water pillar that soared into the sky, a scene that left them dumbfounded appeared. Boom! The thick red flame beam instantly split the water column that was more than 10 feet thick and continued to crazily hit the deck of the warship. Everyone was dumbfounded. Yifan's flame beam was only as thick as a bowl, but it was actually able to instantly penetrate the soaring water column. Whoosh! The white-robed man, standing behind Matsumoto Takeyoshi, was the first to react. Seeing that the flame beam's power was not reduced, he immediately reached out and pressed on Matsumoto Takeyoshi's shoulder. With a whoosh, he disappeared with Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Disperse! The blue-eyed boy was the first to react. As he spoke to the other three boys, he pulled up the stunned Haruko Sakuragi and disappeared with a whoosh. Whoosh! The experts on the deck saw that the situation was critical and did not have time to think. They all used their movement techniques to leave the area. Boom! The huge battleship trembled, and a huge red pillar of light, like a long whip, struck the deck. Rip! The light whip pierced through the deck, and the huge warship was instantly cut in half like tofu. Whoosh! The two sections of the warship instantly burned. In the blink of an eye, the huge warship that was hundreds of feet long was instantly cut off by Yifan. Whoosh! After the huge bow was cut off by Yifan from the main body of the warship, it instantly separated from the main body of the ship. If it were any other ship, after such a strong cut, the seawater would have instantly poured into the hull, and it would not take long for it to sink to the bottom of the sea. However, this warship was not any other ship. This warship had undergone special treatment. Each cabin was independently sealed and was equipped with a mechanism that automatically separated from a hull. In special circumstances, it could even be split into more than a dozen small boats. This way, even if one cabin caught fire or leaked water, it would not affect the other cabins at all. Therefore, even though Yifan's flame whip had instantly severed the ship's bow, it did not have much of an effect on the entire ship. Whoosh! 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 The dozen or so figures that had just disappeared reappeared at the stern of the warship. After everyone appeared, they all had different expressions. Matsumoto Takeyoshi's face was cold and solemn. The man in white looked calm as he stood quietly behind Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Onijiro-'s face was solemn, while Chinkong Iha was expressionless. Kamehameha, who was leaning on his wooden staff, frowned. He stroked his beard as he looked at Yifan in the sky. The four people who had worked together just now did not say a word. Their faces were ugly. They originally thought that their blade, Chi, could hurt Yifan, or at least force Yifan away from his original position. In the end, it was the complete opposite. In the situation of 4 against 1, not only did they not force him to retreat, but they were instantly counterattacked by the opponent and forced to leave their original position. What kind of humiliation was this? Baka, the blue-eyed boy, was the first to break the silence. Originally, he had a belly full of anger from the battle in Miaojiang. Now that he had made a move for the second time, he was countered by the opponent and changed from defense to offense. What embarrassed him the most was that 3 of the 5 boys had made a move, but they did not block Yifan's flame light pillar. Did I ask you to make a move? Just as the blue-eyed boy was about to draw his sword, Matsumoto Takeyoshi suddenly spoke with a solemn face. As he spoke, he looked up at Yifan in the sky. When the few people who had attacked Yifan heard Matsumoto Takeyoshi's tone, their faces immediately changed and they lowered their heads. They suddenly realized that their behavior just now was indeed a little reckless. Without Matsumoto Takeyoshi's permission, they did not have any right to make a move. This was one of the most basic rules. Because of their reckless behavior just now, it directly caused the warship to be damaged. What made them even more scared was that, if it was not for the white-robed man's protection just now, Matsumoto Takeyoshi would have been buried in the sea of fire. We were reckless for a moment. Please punish us. Bama Chanqing was the first to speak. He was the first to make a move. The remaining 3 immediately bowed to Matsumoto Takeyoshi. I'll let it go this time, but don't do again, Matsumoto Takeyoshi said with a gloomy face. Yes, they nodded. Matsumoto Takeyoshi's words seemed to be directed at the 4 people on the surface, but his real intention was for everyone to hear. He only had 2 principles in using people. 1. Loyalty. 2. Usefulness. Both were indispensable. The cultivation of the 13 masters in front of him was not simple, but they had many shortcomings in doing things their own way. Matsumoto Takeyoshi had always wanted to find an opportunity to remind them. Using today's occasion, he did it. I'll ask you again, are you going to open this cauldron or not? Yi Fan, who was floating in the air, asked. Yi Fan Koen, stop messing around. Matsumoto Takeyoshi looked up at Yi Fan and said with a smile, if you continue to mess around like this, you will bear all the consequences. What? Consequences? Bear all the consequences? Matsumoto Takeyoshi's words immediately enraged Yi Fan. His beloved wife had died, and her soul was incomplete. Xiao Zhao had already returned to her fox form, and her cultivation was completely gone. And this liar with a human face and a beast's heart actually said that he would have to bear the consequences himself. Unforgivable. In his anger, Yi Fan shook the long sword in his hand and used his movement skill to instantly descend from the sky. Today he must capture Matsumoto Takeyoshi alive. Shua. Yi Fan's movement skill was like a white stream as he directly rushed towards Matsumoto Takeyoshi on the warship. The 13 masters on the deck did not make a move this time because they had not received Matsumoto Takeyoshi's order to fight. Seeing Yi Fan descend from the sky, the man in white standing behind Matsumoto Takeyoshi narrowed his eyes and stood in front of Matsumoto Takeyoshi, ready to make a move at any time. He was different from the other 13 masters. Protecting Matsumoto Takeyoshi was his duty. Mr. Yamada, you don't have to make a move. With his hands behind his back, Matsumoto Takeyoshi looked up at the descending white stream and smiled at the man in white. Matsumoto Takeyoshi's words immediately caused the pupils of all the masters present to shrink. Was Matsumoto Takeyoshi going to deal with Yi Fan himself? How was that possible? He was just an ordinary person without any cultivation. How could he deal with Yi Fan? Yes. The man in white replied as he disappeared from Matsumoto Takeyoshi's sight and retreated 3 feet behind him. The man in white actually agreed. Chapter 322. Whoosh. Yi Fan was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, he was less than 10 meters away from Matsumoto Takeyoshi. In the blink of an eye, the smiling Matsumoto Takeyoshi's eyes widened. Buzz. Just as Yi Fan's sword was less than 10 meters away from Matsumoto Takeyoshi, the Soul Gatherer evil cauldron on the warship suddenly glowed red and floated above Matsumoto Takeyoshi's head. Matsumoto Takeyoshi could actually control the evil cauldron. The experts exclaimed in their hearts. Not good. Yi Fan saw the evil cauldron suddenly blocking Matsumoto Takeyoshi and immediately channeled his spirit energy. He was afraid that his distant fire sword would hurt the soul of his beloved wife in the evil cauldron. Whoosh! Yi Fan stopped 3 feet above the evil cauldron. Whoosh! Just as he came to a sudden stop, 2 blood-red light pillars, as thick as a bowl, shot out from the eyes of the blood-eye toad on the lid of the evil cauldron and shot directly at Yi Fan. The evil cauldron was less than 3 feet away from Yi Fan, and the 2 blood-red light pillars shot directly at Yi Fan's body. Yi Fan's pupils constricted. In order to stop quickly, he had already channeled his spirit energy in his body, so he didn't have time to use his movement technique again. In addition, he was too close to the evil cauldron, and the light pillars were too sudden, so he couldn't dodge at all. In a moment of desperation, Yi Fan quickly placed the distant fire sword in front of his chest. Boom! 2 blood-red pillars of light struck the ever-flame sword in Yi Fan's hand. Buzz! Red light splattered everywhere, and Yi Fan's body was pushed more than 10 meters away from the warship by the 2 blood-red light pillars. Matsumoto Takeyoshi's face showed a trace of smile. The experts were amazed. This Soul Gatherer cauldron was indeed powerful. No wonder Matsumoto Takeyoshi didn't need the white-robed man to do anything. Shua! In midair, Yi Fan once again used his movement technique and dodged the 2 beams of light from the Soul Congregation evil cauldron. Chirp! Chirp! Yi Fan had just stabilized himself when two more light beams shot towards him. How despicable! Yi Fan cursed Matsumoto Takeyoshi in his heart as he dodged the beam of light. Matsumoto Takeyoshi knew that he did not dare to destroy the evil cauldron, so he kept using it to attack him. Chirp, 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 chirp. The blood-eye toad's eyes continuously shot red beams of light at Yi Fan. Yi Fan furrowed his brows as he continuously dodged the blood-eyed toad's attacks with his movement technique. At the same time, he racked his brains for a countermeasure. Now, he was facing two problems: the man in white and the evil cauldron. The man in white was extremely powerful and never left Matsumoto Takeyoshi's side. With him around, it would be very difficult for him to get close to Matsumoto Takeyoshi. And this evil cauldron was even more of a headache for him. This evil cauldron was completely under the control of Matsumoto Takeyoshi's mind. It could attack, retreat, and defend at will. He couldn't break it, and he had to constantly dodge the evil cauldron's attacks. He was stuck between a rock and a hard place. The man in white, Matsumoto Takeyoshi, and the evil cauldron. The three of them complemented each other and were unbreakable. He couldn't do anything to them. Buzz! Just as Yi Fan was racking his brains for a countermeasure, the Soul Gatherer evil cauldron above Matsumoto Takeyoshi's head stopped attacking. It retracted its red light and slowly landed in front of Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Yi Fan stopped and floated in the air, frowning as he looked down. Yi Fan, Koen, stop fooling around, Matsumoto Takeyoshi said to Yi Fan with a smile. Let's sit down and talk. There's nothing to talk about between us, Yi Fan said coldly. Oh, is that so? Matsumoto Takeyoshi smiled as he lightly tapped the Soul Gatherer evil cauldron in front of him. Buzz, buzz. The Soul Gatherer evil cauldron flashed with a green light. Ah! A woman's scream came from within the evil cauldron. It sounded very painful. Chico! Yi Fan, who was floating in the air, shouted. The woman's voice that came from the cauldron was none other than Fujiwara no Chico's voice that he had been thinking about day and night. Chico! Yi Fan shouted as he quickly descended. Whoosh! 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 When a master saw Yi Fan descending at high speed, they immediately moved and surrounded Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Matsumoto Takeyoshi did not allow them to attack, but he did not say that they could not defend. However, there was one person who did not move. That was Akatsuki, who was wearing a red dress and a veil over her face. Whoosh! In a flash, Yi Fan landed on the warship in front of the Soul Gatherer evil cauldron. Chico! Chico! Yi Fan squatted down and shouted at the Soul Gatherer evil cauldron. There was no movement from within the evil cauldron. What did you do to Chico? Yi Fan roared as he turned to look at Matsumoto Takeyoshi, his eyes flashing red. This scene shocked the 12 masters surrounding Matsumoto Takeyoshi, and they instinctively gripped their weapons. Chapter 323. Yi Fan stood up, holding a sword with one hand and pointing it to the ground. He gritted his teeth as he looked at Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Don't worry, Miss Chico's soul is still very safe for now, Matsumoto Takeyoshi said. What will it take for you to return Chico to me? Yi Fan directly asked. I don't have the weapon forging manual or the bronze man diagram manual. Haha, I don't need those two things now, Matsumoto Takeyoshi said with a smile as he waved his hand. Then what do you want? Yi Fan asked with a frown. Don't you know what I want? Matsumoto Takeyoshi said as he smiled at Yi Fan. You want the 9 cauldrons? Yi Fan asked with raised eyebrows. That's right, Matsumoto Takeyoshi said without beating around the bush. I only have one goal in coming to Great Ming Dynasty, and that is to find the legendary divine artifact of the country, the 9 cauldrons. What you're looking for has nothing to do with me, Yi Fan said coldly. Give me Chico's soul, and from then on, you can find your 9 cauldrons, and I'll live my life. The two of us will mind our own business. Whoever wants to sit in the Great Ming Dynasty can sit there. It has nothing to do with me. Yi Fan, Koen, you're wrong, Matsumoto Takeyoshi said as he paced around. I'm not the only one searching for the 9 cauldrons in Great Ming Dynasty. There are many factions, crouching tigers and hidden dragons, and there are many experts. They're extremely difficult to deal with. You want me to help you get rid of your dissidents? Yi Fan asked with a frown. Hee, Lord Yi Fan knows me best. Matsumoto Takeyoshi stopped and turned around to face Yi Fan. As long as you help me find the 9 cauldrons and clear out the obstacles, I will definitely return Miss Chico's soul to you. Not only that, but after I take control of the Great Ming Dynasty, I will definitely restore your Yi clan's reputation and allow your clan to rise again. What if I don't agree? Yi Fan looked up at Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Well, Matsumoto Takeyoshi smiled as he stroked the soul-gathering evil cauldron. If Yi Fan Kuan does not agree, I will not force you. However, this soul-gathering cauldron is filled with thousands of demons and ghosts. If something really happens to Miss Chico's soul, as Matsumoto Takeyoshi spoke, he looked up at Yi Fan with a sinister smile. You dare, Yi Fan said angrily. Don't be so agitated, Yi Fan can. Matsumoto Takeyoshi smiled. I'm just saying what if. Everything depends on Yi Fan Kuan's decision. Yi Fan frowned and fell into deep thought. To be honest, he didn't care who ruled the Great Ming Dynasty. Since ancient times, it was normal for dynasties to change. What he was worried about was that if he helped Matsumoto Takeyoshi, he would attract the condemnation of the righteous people of the Great Ming Dynasty. They might even draw swords against him. At that time, he would be a sinner who would go down in history with infamy. How is it? Have you thought it through? Matsumoto Takeyoshi asked when he saw Yi Fan lowering his head and thinking for a long time. I need time to think about it. Yi Fan frowned. I can wait for you. Matsumoto Takeyoshi saw that Yi Fan was hesitating and was delighted. His eyes lit up. How long do you need? 3 days at most. I'll give you an answer. With a serious expression, Yi Fan looked up at Matsumoto Takeyoshi and said, Within 3 days, I want you to guarantee the safety of Chico's soul. You can rest assured. Matsumoto Takeyoshi said, To show my sincerity to Yi Fan Kuan, I'll release 2 of Miss Chico's soul now. Really? Yi Fan frowned and asked. Matsumoto Takeyoshi's words made his heart skip a beat. I'm Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Always do what I say. Matsumoto Takeyoshi said as he walked up to the Soul Congregation Evil Cauldron. He slowly opened his palm and placed it in front of the blood-eye toad's mouth. The Soul Congregation Evil Cauldron began to emit a faint green light. Asterisk whoosh, asterisk 2 rays of white light shot out from the skull in the blood-eyed toad's mouth. They slowly gathered in Matsumoto Takeyoshi's palm, turning into a walnut-sized white ball of light. These are 2 of Miss Chico's soul. Matsumoto Takeyoshi said as he held the ball of light in his palm and handed it to Yi Fan. Whether you agree or not, I'll give you these 2. Yi Fan reached out and took the ball of light. When the ball of light came into contact with Yi Fan's palm, Yi Fan's tears were about to fall. The aura emitted by this ball of light belonged to his beloved wife, Fujiwara no Chico. When you go back, give it to the person who helped you snatch her soul. He will know what to do. Matsumoto Takeyoshi said to Yi Fan. He and the Soul Congregation Evil Cauldron were telepathically connected. When Jin Shan and the Evil Cauldron tried to snatch her soul, he had already known about it from 1,000 miles away. Within 3 days, I will give you an answer. Yi Fan said to Matsumoto Takeyoshi with a cold expression. I hope you bring good news. Matsumoto Takeyoshi said to Yi Fan. Yi Fan sheathed the departing flame sword in the scabbard on his back, and then carefully held the white ball of light in his hand. Then he used his movement technique and disappeared with a whoosh. Matsumoto Takeyoshi raised his head and saw a white beam of light streaking across the horizon, moving further and further away. Arrange for people to repair the warship. Matsumoto Takeyoshi said to the ninjas not far away. Then prepare a first-class cabin and prepare to welcome the new guests. Yes. The ninjas nodded. Matsumoto Takeyoshi smiled and turned to walk towards the cabin. The man in white followed closely behind. At this time, Matsumoto Takeyoshi was in a very good mood. The man in blue was a battle wolf. Yi Fan was a fierce tiger. Giving up a wolf to get a fierce tiger, it was a win-win situation. Chapter 324. It seems that we have another companion. After Matsumoto Takeyoshi entered the cabin, Chinkong Iha smiled and said to everyone, "A companion, but also an opponent." Onajiro smiled and turned to look at Chinkong Iha. "How can I allow others to snore beside my bed?" The blue-eyed boy frowned and said, "It doesn't matter if he's a comrade or an opponent." The wooden turtle crane said, "I like this young man." Funakoshi Shinichi was silent, turned around, and returned to the cabin. Behind Funakoshi Shinichi was the blue-clothed man, Akirasato. If only this little brother was really our companion. Mochizuki Kumi shook the maid in her hand and smiled. At that time, we can learn from each other. Kano Nagato was unhappy. He didn't like Mochizuki Kumi to be tempted by other men. This person's evil aura is too strong. We'd better stay away from him. Sakuraji Haruko frowned and said, "I think you're thinking too much." Fujita Tsuyoshi, who had been silent, said, "Whether this person is a friend or a foe, we'll know in 3 days. Why bother?" In Fujita-san's opinion, will this person cooperate with Matsumoto-san? Onajiro asked Fujita Tsuyoshi. China has an old saying, "You're in Chao's camp, but your heart is in Han." Fujita Tsuyoshi said while looking at Onajiro Tsuyoshi. Onajiro-san is right. This person is neither a foe nor a friend. Miss Mochizuki, what do you think? Chinkong Iha asked Akatsuki. When Yi Fan attacked Matsumoto Takeyoshi among the 13 people, only Akatsuki didn't move, which aroused Chinkong Iha's curiosity. "I think he will come." Akatsuki, whose face was covered by a veil, calmly said. She said as she walked to the cabin alone. "This time I have a competitor." Looking at Akatsuki's back, Mochizuki Kumi giggled. Knowing the affairs of the world, winning fame in life and behind, pity happens for nothing. Chinkong Iha smiled and recited a poem as he walked towards the cabin above the clouds. Yi Fan used his movement technique and turned into a dazzling white light, flying towards Pear Blossom Palace as fast as lightning. He now had 2 of Fujiwara no Chico's 3 spiritual souls and 7 physical souls in his hands. He was anxious to let Fujiwara no Chico return these 2 souls to her body. Baihu Xiao Zhao quietly lay on Yi Fan's shoulder. From beginning to end, he did not utter a single word. As long as it was by Yi Fan's side, it would feel safe and secure, even if it was surrounded or in danger. Should he agree to Matsumoto Takeyoshi's conditions? Yi Fan furrowed his brows as he thought about this problem while hurrying through the clouds. Matsumoto Takeyoshi wanted the world of the great Ming dynasty, and he wanted the soul of his beloved wife. The 2 seemingly unrelated matters were suddenly connected. What should he do? Help Matsumoto Takeyoshi eliminate his enemies and find the 9 cauldrons? Help him seize the world of the great Ming dynasty. If that was the case, he would be a sinner through and through. He would be the enemy of the entire great Ming dynasty, unloyal and unjust, and be cursed by all the people. Should he not help Matsumoto Takeyoshi? Then what about his beloved wife's soul? What about his beloved wife's life? He could not even save his own wife. So what kind of man was he? Now, even the soul return grass could not save his beloved wife. If he wanted to save his beloved wife, he could only agree to Matsumoto Takeyoshi's conditions. There was no other way. On one side, he would be cursed for being unloyal and unjust, and on the other side, he would save his beloved wife's life. Yi Fan fell into a dilemma. After a long time, Yi Fan finally made a decision. He chose the latter, his beloved wife. The reason was very simple and very obvious. What did the great Ming dynasty give him? Confiscation, arrest, migration of the entire clan. What did his beloved wife give him? Laughter, happiness, unchanging until death. Today, the great Ming dynasty was filled with endless internal and external strife. The country's people had no way to make a living, and the common people were full of complaints. What was the use of such a great Ming dynasty? Forget it. Yi Fan slowly closed his eyes. Whether it was unloyalty or unrighteousness, all the sins would be shouldered by him alone. No matter what, Chico was innocent. She should not die. After Yi Fan made his decision, he immediately opened his eyes and sped up. A white light rushed straight to Pear Blossom Palace. After the time it took to make a cup of tea, Yi Fan once again arrived above Pear Blossom Palace. Looking at the rumbling waterfall below his feet, Yi Fan could not help but shake his head and smile bitterly. 2 hours ago, he was still telling Jin-chan about his will, preparing to perish together with Matsumoto Takeyoshi. But in a short 2 hours, he was already preparing to help Matsumoto Takeyoshi find the 9 cauldrons and seize the great Ming dynasty. Sometimes, things in this world were like this. It was hard to fathom and make people unable to act independently. As Yi Fan was thinking, he slowly descended and flew into the waterfall. Just as the man and fox touched the waterfall, a translucent sphere about 1 zhang in size surrounded the two of them. Not a single drop of water splashed onto the two of them. This was all thanks to the water avoidance pearl in Yi Fan's bosom. This treasure had an extremely strong ability to avoid water. If it was surrounded by water, it would automatically form a protective barrier of 1 zhang in size. "Granny, I'm back." After Yi Fan landed, he shouted and walked quickly to Pear Blossom Palace. It was Fan Air. At the entrance of Pear Blossom Palace, Jin-chan was already waiting there with a look of surprise. Beside her stood a middle-aged man who looked to be about 40 years old. Actually, when Yi Fan had just entered Miaojiang, Jin-chan had already sensed the aura of Yi Fan and Xiao Zhao. What made her even happier was that she could faintly sense a trace of Fujiwara no Chico's aura. It seemed that everything went smoothly. Jin-chan was overjoyed in her heart. "Granny, quick! Chico's 2 souls, I've already..." Yi Fan said as he appeared in Jin-chan's line of sight. However, when Yi Fan saw the person standing beside Jin-chan, he was instantly stunned. "Grandfather!" Yi Fan shouted excitedly. He shouted as he walked quickly to the middle-aged man. Chapter 3:25. After forging the little Taoist boy's treasured sword, Yi Yun handed the safety of the Yi clan to Yi Kong and Yi Chun while he rushed to the great Ming dynasty alone. Firstly, he wanted to fulfill his promise of forging a sword for the little Taoist boy. Secondly, he was worried about Yi Fan and Jin-chan. At the same time, he also wanted to inquire about the movements of the imperial court. In order to avoid being searched by the soldiers, Yi Yun had already disguised himself and put on a human skin mask. He rested in a hotel during the day and hurried on his journey at night. It took him half a month to reach the Pear Blossom Palace from the Mongolian Empire. Although he was wearing a human skin mask, Yi Fan's cultivation was no longer the same as before. He was able to recognize him with a single glance. "Fan Air." Yi Yun's voice was filled with excitement and tenderness. Jin-chan had already told him everything about Yi Fan. Yi Yun never thought that so many things would happen while he was away. His granddaughter-in-law's soul was captured. Xiao Zhao's cultivation was completely gone, and his only grandson experienced a life and death crisis. His black hair turned white overnight. "Grandfather." Yi Fan rushed in front of Yi Yun. Whoosh! Baihu, who was on Yi Fan's shoulder, jumped into Jin-chan's embrace. "Fan Air, you've suffered." Yi Yun looked at the silver-haired Yi Fan, who was covered in blood. His eyes turned red. He only had one grandson, Yi Fan. When he saw Yi Fan's current appearance, he felt as if his heart was being cut by a knife. "Grandfather, how are you? Where's my father? Where's Uncle Yi Chun?" Yi Fan asked anxiously as he looked behind Yi Yun. "Your father and your Uncle Yi Chun are doing well. Don't worry." Yi Yun wiped his tears and said, "Why didn't they come back with you?" Yi Fan asked Yi Yun. "It's a long story. I'll tell you later." Yi Yun said, "What about you? Have you found Chico's soul?" Yi Fan shook his head. When his beloved wife was mentioned, his mood became somewhat gloomy. "Grandma, these are Chico's two souls," Yi Fan said as he handed the ball of light in his hand to Jinshan. "Hurry and return these two souls to Chico's soul into her body." Looking at the light ball that Yi Fan handed to it, Golden Silkworm lifted its head and looked at Yi Fan in confusion. She did not understand why Yi Fan had only obtained 2 of Fujiwara Chico's physical souls. Were the 3 most important souls? Why didn't he get them? If he could get the 2 souls, he should be able to get the 3 souls. What exactly happened to Yi Fan when he left? "Grandma." Yi Fan saw Jinshan's confusion and said, "Save Chico first. I'll tell you everything later." Jinshan nodded and turned to enter Pear Blossom Palace. Yi Fan and Yian followed closely behind. The 3 people and 1 fox arrived in front of Fujiwara no Chico's body. Fujiwara no Chico, who had consumed the soul-returning grass, had already obtained the 3 souls. At this moment, her face was rosy and her body was soft and warm. It was almost as if she was asleep. Looking at his beloved wife lying on the wooden bed, Yi Fan's heart almost broke. He really hoped that everything in front of him was just a dream. After waking up, Fujiwara no Chico would still be by his side like before, bickering with him and acting coquettishly with him. Unfortunately, this was not a dream. After Jinshan arrived in front of Fujiwara no Chico, she opened her palm and gently blew at the ball of light in her hand. Whoosh! The white ball of light instantly turned into 3 rays of white light and flew into Fujiwara no Chico's 7 orifices. Buzz! Fujiwara no Chico's body began to emit a layer of gentle white light. Huff! Within the white light, Fujiwara no Chico exhaled and her chest began to rise and fall. His beloved wife was alive. Yi Fan was overjoyed. "Chico." Seeing Fujiwara no Chico begin to breathe, Yi Fan immediately rushed in front of Fujiwara no Chico. He paused, held Fujiwara no Chico's hand with both hands, and shouted Fujiwara no Chico's name. "Chico! Chico!" Yi Fan kept shouting. Her 7 spirits are now complete, and she can breathe normally, but she can't wake up yet, Jinshan said. As long as the 3 spirits of heaven, earth and man, enter her body, she will be able to fully recover, Jinshan said and asked Yi Fan, "Where are the 3 spirits of Chico?" "They are still in the Soul Congregation Evil Cauldron," Yi Fan said as he placed Fujiwara no Chico's arm back in place. "Then how did you get these 2 spirits?" Jinshan asked. "Matsumoto Takeyoshi gave them to me," Yi Fan said. "Matsumoto Takeyoshi gave them to you?" Jinshan frowned. "Did you force him to give them to you?" Yi Fan shook his head. "He gave them to me of his own accord." "He gave them to you of his own accord?" Jinshan frowned. Yi Fan's words made her feel that something was wrong. Yi Fan nodded. "Fan Air, what is going on?" Ian also felt that something was wrong. Why would he give you Chico's 2 spirits of his own accord? Yi Fan had no choice but to tell them how he was attacked by the evil cauldron, and how he negotiated with Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Shameless. Ian was furious after hearing Yi Fan's words. "What do you plan to do?" Jinshan frowned and asked Yi Fan. "I want to save Chico," Yi Fan said calmly. "You want to help Matsumoto Takeyoshi?" Jinshan raised her eyebrows and asked Yi Fan. Yi Fan nodded. "What?" Ian couldn't believe his ears. "You want to help that bastard take over the Great Ming Dynasty." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.